I still remember the look on my son Daniel's face the day he opened the old leather diary I had hidden for nearly 20 years. He had spent months believing I was slowly forgetting him, that old age had stolen my memories and left me trapped in confusion. But as he turned each fragile page, his hands began to tremble. By the time he reached the final entry, the man who thought his mother had forgotten him was on his knees sobbing,
It's all right here.
realizing he had never
Sorry.
truly known the sacrifices I had buried in silence. If this story touches something in your heart, I'd love for you to stay with me until the very end. Please, like this video, subscribe if you enjoy heartfelt family stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever misunderstood someone you loved, or been misunderstood yourself? And before you go, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I'd truly love to read every comment. Before my son Daniel became the man who looked at me like I was a stranger, he was the little boy who used to hold my hand so tightly I could feel his heartbeat through his fingers. Back then, we lived in a small white house on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. It was not fancy, not the kind of house people turned their heads to admire, but it was ours. The porch leaned a little to the left, the kitchen window stuck whenever it rained, and every winter, I had to put rolled towels under the doors to keep the cold air from sneaking in. But to Daniel, that house was the whole world. He was 6 when his father Michael died. One ordinary Tuesday morning, Michael kissed me before work, told Daniel to be good for his mama, and walked out wearing his Navy jacket. By lunchtime, I was standing in a hospital hallway, listening to a doctor say words I could not understand because my ears had started ringing. A heart attack. Gone before they could save him. I remember coming home that evening and finding Daniel sitting on the living room floor with his toy trucks lined up in a perfect row. He looked up at me and asked, "Is Daddy working late?" I knelt in front of him, and for the first time in my life, I realized there are moments when a mother has to break her own heart so her child can understand the truth. I told him his daddy had gone to heaven. Daniel did not cry at first. He just stared at me confused, as if I had spoken another language. Then he crawled into my lap, wrapped both arms around my neck, and whispered, "But you won't go too, right, Mommy?" I held him so tightly I could barely breathe. "No, baby," I told him. "I'm right here." From that day on, it was just the two of us. I worked mornings at a bakery and evenings cleaning offices downtown. Some nights, I came home smelling like flour and lemon disinfectant, my feet swollen in shoes that had lost their shape years earlier. But the moment I opened the door and saw Daniel asleep on the couch with a book on his chest, every ache in my body became worth it. I never wanted him to feel poor, even when we were. If he needed new sneakers for school, I wore my old coat another winter. If there was a field trip, I picked up an extra cleaning shift. If he wanted cereal with marshmallows instead of the plain kind, I clipped coupons until my fingers hurt. He never knew how many times I skipped dinner and told him I had eaten at work. Every Sunday morning, no matter how tired I was, I made pancakes. That was our tradition. Daniel would drag a kitchen chair to the counter, stand on it in his pajamas, and stir the batter with both hands like he was doing important business. He always spilled flour on the floor. Always. And every time he would look at me with those wide brown eyes and say, "It snowed in the kitchen again." I would laugh even on mornings when I wanted to cry. We ate at the little round table beside the window. He liked his pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, though mine usually looked more like broken clouds. Still, Daniel never complained. He would pour too much syrup over them and say, "These are the best pancakes in America." To this day, I cannot smell warm maple syrup without seeing his small face glowing in that morning light. Daniel was a bright child, but more than that, he was tender. When I fell asleep in my chair after work, he would cover me with a blanket. When he heard me coughing in winter, he brought me water in a plastic cup with cartoon dinosaurs on it. On Mother's Day, he once gave me a card made from notebook paper. The spelling was terrible, but I kept it. It said, "You are my best mom." My best mom. Not the best mom. His best mom. I tucked that card inside my first diary between a grocery receipt and a photograph of him missing his 2 front teeth. I started writing in diaries after Michael died. At first, it was because grief had nowhere else to go. I wrote things I could not say out loud. I wrote about bills, fear, loneliness, and the quiet panic of raising a son alone. But slowly the diary became something else. It became a place where I preserved Daniel, his first school award, the day he learned to ride a bike, the night he cried because another boy said he did not have a dad, the morning he put on one of Michael's old ties and said, "Do I look like him?" I wrote it all down because I was afraid life would move too fast, and one day, those little moments would blur together. I did not know then that the diary would become the only witness to the kind of mother I had been. When Daniel was 10, he joined the school choir. He was nervous before his first performance, so nervous he nearly refused to get out of the car. I remember turning off the engine, reaching over, and fixing his collar. "What if I mess up?" he asked. "Then you keep singing," I said. He looked at me unsure. I smiled. That's what strong people do. That night, I sat in the front row, wearing my best church dress, the one with the little pearl buttons. I had come straight from work and barely had time to wash my hands, but I was there. When Daniel walked onto that stage and saw me, his face changed. He stood a little taller. He sang louder than every child in that room. Afterward, he ran into my arms and said, "You came." I kissed the top of his head. "I will always come." And I meant it. I came to every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every baseball game, even the ones where he sat on the bench the whole time. I cheered as if he had hit the winning home run. I took pictures with a cheap camera that sometimes left red spots on people's eyes. I saved programs, ribbons, report cards, and every handwritten note. There were men who asked me out after Michael passed. Kind men, lonely men, men who said Daniel needed a father figure. But I could never bring myself to build a life that made my son feel second. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe I gave too much of myself away. But at the time, loving Daniel felt like the only direction my heart knew how to go. He was my son, my purpose, my reason to wake up when grief wanted me to stay in bed. As he grew older, he began to understand more. He noticed the unpaid bills on the kitchen counter. He noticed when I pretended not to want anything new for myself. One winter, when he was 13, he found me sewing the same tear in my coat sleeve for the 3rd time. He stood in the doorway and said, "When I grow up, I'm going to buy you a house with no cold air." I laughed softly. "This house is enough for me." "No," he said, serious as a grown man. "You deserve better." Those words stayed with me. Not because I needed a bigger house. I never did. But because my boy saw me. He saw the sacrifices even when I tried to hide them. And for many years, I believed he would never forget. On the night before he left for college, Daniel sat with me on the porch. The summer air smelled like cut grass and rain. His bags were packed by the door, and I had spent the whole day pretending I was excited instead of terrified. He was going to Northwestern on a scholarship. Chicago felt like another planet to me, but I smiled every time someone mentioned it because I wanted him to go without guilt. Daniel leaned his head against my shoulder, just like he did when he was little. "Mom," he said, "I'm not going to be one of those sons who forgets where he came from." I looked at him, my eyes burning. "I know," I whispered. He reached for my hand. "I'll call every Sunday," he promised. "Pancake Day, I laughed through tears. You better. Then he said the sentence I carried in my heart for years. Mom, I'll never leave you. At the time, I believed him completely. I did not know that life can take a promise and stretch it so thin you barely recognize it anymore. I did not know success could build a wall between a mother and her child. I did not know another woman would one day stand between us, smiling politely while cutting invisible threads. All I knew was that my boy was leaving, and I was proud. So that night, after Daniel went to bed, I opened my diary and wrote, "My son is going into the world tomorrow. I pray the world is kind to him. I pray he remembers he is loved. And I pray he always knows that no matter how far he goes, there is a light on for him at home." Then I closed the diary, pressed it to my chest, and cried quietly in the kitchen where it had once snowed flour on Sunday mornings. Daniel kept his promise for the first few months. Every Sunday evening, right around 7, the phone would ring in my little kitchen. I would be waiting before it even made a sound, sitting at the table with a cup of tea I usually forgot to drink. Sometimes I made pancakes for dinner just because it was Sunday, and because hearing his voice made the house feel less empty. "Hey, Mom," he would say, bright and breathless, like college life was pulling him in 10 directions at once. And I would close my eyes for half a second, letting those 2 words settle over me. "Hey, Mom." It was amazing how much warmth could live inside something so ordinary. He told me about his classes, his roommate from Wisconsin, the dining hall food, the professor who scared everyone, the city lights along Lake Michigan. He said Chicago was loud, fast, expensive, and beautiful. He said he had never seen so many people walking, like they all had somewhere important to be. I listened to every word as if he were reading scripture. Sometimes I wrote little notes while he talked. Not because I was forgetful, but because I wanted to remember the exact shape of his life while he was away from me. Daniel likes economics class. Daniel says the wind in Chicago feels like it has teeth. Daniel misses my pancakes, but says not to tell anyone. After each call, I opened my diary and wrote down what he had told me. I wanted a record of his becoming. A mother spends years watching her child grow, but there is a strange grief in watching them grow beyond your reach. At first, I was proud enough to cover the loneliness. I bragged about him at the bakery. I told Mrs. Henderson from church that my Daniel was studying at Northwestern. I mailed him care packages with socks, granola bars, handwritten notes, and $20 bills tucked inside envelopes, even when I barely had $20 to spare. He always called to thank me. "Mom, you don't have to keep sending me money," he said once. I know, I told him. "Then why do you do it?" "Because I'm your mother." He laughed softly. "That's not an answer." "It is the only answer that matters." For a while, that was enough. Then slowly, the calls changed. Not all at once. If love disappeared suddenly, maybe the heart would know how to defend itself. But distance has a quieter way of arriving. It comes disguised as reasonable things: a study group, an exam, a networking event, a part-time internship, a dead phone battery. "I'll call you tomorrow, Mom." Then tomorrow became Thursday. Thursday became next week. Next week became a text message with 3 words. "Busy. Love you." I told myself not to be selfish. Daniel was building a future. He was doing exactly what I had prayed he would do. Children are not born to sit forever in the homes where we raise them. They are meant to step out, to stand tall, to become themselves. I knew that, but knowing a thing does not always stop it from hurting. The house became too quiet after he left. His bedroom stayed the same for the first year. I washed his old sheets, though no one slept in them. I dusted his baseball trophies, kept his high school graduation photo on the dresser, and left the little lamp by his bed plugged in. Sometimes, when I passed the doorway, I expected to hear music or the bounce of a basketball against the floor. Instead, there was silence. One Sunday, he did not call at all. I waited until 8, then 9, then 10. At 10:30, I dialed him. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just checking in. I hope you're eating real food and not living on coffee. Call me when you get a minute. I love you." He called back 2 days later. "Sorry, Mom. Things got crazy." I smiled, even though he could not see me. "That's all right. I meant to call. I know." But that night in my diary, I wrote only one sentence, "Maybe next Sunday." By his senior year, Daniel sounded different, more polished, more careful. He had learned the language of successful people. He said things like long-term strategy. By his senior year, Daniel sounded different, more polished, more careful. He had learned the language of successful people. He said things like long-term strategy, market value, and career trajectory. He talked about internships at firms where men wore suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He told me about people whose parents owned vacation homes and donated to universities. I was proud of him. Of course I was. But sometimes, when I said something simple, something small town, something ordinary, there was a pause on the other end of the line. A tiny pause. The kind a mother notices. Once I asked if he was still wearing the winter coat I bought him from the outlet store. He said, "Mom, I'm fine. I just worry. Chicago gets cold." I said I'm fine. His voice was not cruel. Not yet. But it had an edge I did not recognize. I looked down at my hands, rough from years of work, and said, "All right, baby." Another pause. Then he said, "Mom, can you maybe not call me baby when my friends are around?" I laughed because I did not know what else to do. "Oh, of course. I'm sorry." He sighed. "It's okay." But it did not feel okay. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The same table where he had once spilled flour and declared it snow. The same table where he had promised to call every Sunday. I opened my diary and wrote, "Today I learned that a mother can embarrass her son without meaning to." I must remember, he is grown now. When Daniel graduated, I went to Chicago alone. I wore my navy dress, the one I had saved for church holidays, and low heels because my knees were not what they used to be. I took a Greyhound bus because flying cost too much. The trip was long and my back ached by the time I arrived, but none of that mattered. My son was graduating. I carried flowers wrapped in paper and a card with $100 inside. It was money I had saved over 3 months, a little at a time. I wanted him to buy himself something nice, maybe a tie or a dinner out. When I saw him in his cap and gown standing among all those bright young people, my heart nearly burst. "Daniel," I called. He turned, and for a second, I saw my little boy again. Then 2 young men beside him looked over, and something shifted in his face. Not shame, exactly, but discomfort. He walked toward me quickly. "Mom, you made it?" "Of course I made it." I reached to hug him, but he leaned down stiffly, careful not to crush the flowers between us. "You didn't have to bring all that," he said. "I wanted to." His eyes moved over my dress, my old handbag, the flowers, the sensible shoes I had polished the night before. Then he glanced back toward his friends. "Come meet everyone," he said, but his smile was tight. I followed him, trying not to feel out of place among the polished parents and expensive cameras. One woman wore pearls the size of raindrops. A father near us spoke loudly about his son's job offer in New York. When Daniel introduced me, he said, "This is my mother, Angela." Not Mom, my mother, Angela. It was a small thing, such a small thing that I scolded myself for noticing. But love is made of small things. So is pain. One of his friends asked, "Did you come in from Ohio?" "Yes," I said warmly. "Columbus," Daniel quickly added. "She still lives in the house where I grew up." Still, that word stayed with me. After the ceremony, I asked if he wanted to have dinner. "I can't tonight," he said. "A group of us already made plans." "Oh." I held the flowers closer. "Of course, you understand, right?" I nodded, because that is what mothers do when their hearts are breaking in public. He hugged me again, quicker this time, and said, "I'll call you this weekend." Then he was gone, swept into a crowd of laughing graduates. I stood there, holding flowers meant for him. That night in a cheap motel room, I wrote in my diary with the television murmuring against the wall. Daniel looked handsome today. Successful. Grown. I am proud beyond words. But for the first time, I felt like a guest in my son's life. After graduation, Daniel stayed in Chicago. He got a job with a corporate sales firm downtown. His voice grew sharper, busier, always half turned towards something else. I could hear keyboards clicking behind him when we talked. Sometimes he answered me while walking, breathing fast, saying, "I only have 5 minutes, Mom." 5 minutes. I had given him 18 years of my life, and I was grateful for 5 minutes. I hate admitting that. It makes me sound bitter, and I was not bitter then. I was confused. I kept trying to understand the new rules. Call less, ask fewer questions. Do not sound needy. Do not mention how quiet the house is. Do not say baby if someone might hear. So I adjusted myself into smaller and smaller spaces. When he forgot to call, I told myself he was tired. When he visited Columbus only once that year, I told myself travel was expensive. When he spent Thanksgiving with a coworker's family because it made sense professionally, I told myself opportunities mattered. But each excuse left a little bruise. One December evening, I mailed him a box of Christmas ornaments from his childhood. Not all of them, just a few, the paper angel he made in first grade, the little wooden train Michael had bought him, and a cracked blue ornament with his name painted in silver. I included a note. "Thought you might like a little piece of home." He texted 3 days later. "Thanks, Mom. Nice memories. Nice memories." I stared at those words until the screen went dark. To him, maybe that was all they were, becoming memories. To me, they were still the bones of my life. I did not know then that Daniel's distance was making room for someone else's voice. I did not know that soon a woman named Rebecca would enter his world with perfect hair, perfect manners, and a smile that never reached her eyes when she looked at me. I only knew that my son was changing, and I loved him too much to accuse him of it. So I kept writing. Maybe next Sunday. Maybe next visit. Maybe he is just busy. And every time I wrote the word, maybe, I felt the first threads between us beginning to loosen. I first heard Rebecca's name on a Sunday evening in late March. Daniel called while I was rinsing a coffee mug at the kitchen sink. I remember the exact sound of his voice that night. Brighter than usual. Nervous, but in a happy way. The kind of voice a mother recognizes before her child even says the words. "Mom," he said, "I met someone." My hand paused under the running water. "Oh," I said, smiling before I even knew why. "Someone important?" He laughed softly. Maybe. Her name was Rebecca Carter then. She worked in marketing for a luxury hotel group in Chicago. Daniel said she was smart, confident, beautiful, organized, and really going places. He said that last part with admiration, as if ambition itself were a kind of beauty. I listened carefully, the way mothers do, when they are trying to hear what their child is not saying. "She sounds lovely," I told him. "She is," he said quickly. "She's different, Mom. She knows what she wants." I almost said, "And what do you want?" but I held my tongue. Instead, I asked, "Does she make you happy?" There was a pause. Then Daniel said, "Yeah, I think she does." That night after we hung up, I opened my diary. Daniel has met a woman named Rebecca. His voice changed when he spoke of her. I pray she loves the gentle parts of him, not only the successful ones. I met Rebecca 3 months later. Daniel brought her to Columbus on a warm June afternoon. I had spent 2 days preparing the house. I washed the curtains, polished the little coffee table, baked a peach cobbler, and bought fresh flowers, even though they were not in my budget. I wanted her to feel welcomed. More than that, I wanted Daniel to feel proud bringing her home. When their car pulled into the driveway, I stood by the front window, smoothing my blouse like a schoolgirl. Daniel stepped out first wearing a crisp white shirt and sunglasses. Then Rebecca got out of the passenger side. She was beautiful. There was no denying that. Tall, slender, with shiny auburn hair cut just below her shoulders, and a cream-colored dress that looked too expensive for my porch. She moved carefully, as if every step had been practiced. Daniel put his hand on her back. "Mom, he said this is Rebecca." She smiled and extended her hand. "Angela, it's so nice to finally meet you." "Not Mrs. Morris. Not Mom. Angela." There was nothing wrong with it, I told myself. Many modern women used first names. I shook her hand, and her fingers felt cool and soft. "It's wonderful to meet you too, sweetheart," I said. Something flickered across her face when I said sweetheart. It was gone so quickly I almost thought I imagined it. Inside, she looked around the living room with polite interest. Her eyes moved over the framed photographs, the crocheted blanket on the sofa, the old wooden cabinet Michael had built before Daniel was born. "This is charming," she said. Charming? I had heard women use that word in antique stores when they meant old. Daniel did not notice. Or if he did, he pretended not to. At lunch, I served roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, and cobbler. Rebecca thanked me for the meal, but barely touched the potatoes. "I don't usually eat much starch," she said lightly. Daniel laughed. "Rebecca is very disciplined." I smiled. "That's good." But I remembered Daniel as a boy eating pancakes drowned in syrup, licking his fingers while I pretended to scold him. I wondered when food had become something to control instead of enjoy. During the meal, Rebecca asked me many questions. At first, I thought she was being thoughtful. "Do you still work at the bakery? Are you alone here most nights? Do you drive much these days? Have you thought about downsizing?" Each question sounded gentle, reasonable, but together, they made me feel as if she were measuring my life and finding it inefficient. Daniel kept answering for me. "Mom's fine. She's comfortable here. She's always been independent." Every time he spoke, Rebecca turned her eyes toward him, and I saw something pass between them. Not affection, direction, as if she were silently teaching him what to say. After lunch, Daniel went outside to take a work call. Rebecca and I were alone in the kitchen. I began washing dishes, and she stood beside the counter, watching me fold a towel over the oven handle. "You've done a lot for Daniel," she said. I looked over and smiled. "He's my son." "Yes," she said. "He mentioned how close you two were." Were. Again, such a small word. I placed a plate in the drying rack. "We still are." Rebecca smiled, but it did not warm her eyes. "Of course. I only mean Daniel has a very demanding life now. His career requires focus, stability, the right image." I felt my hands still in the soapy water. The right image. She tilted her head. "You know how these corporate circles are. People judge everything. Where you live, how you speak, who surrounds you." For a moment, I could hear only the drip of water from the faucet. Then she added softly, "I just want what's best for him." I dried my hands slowly. "So do I." "I know," she said, "but sometimes mothers have a hard time letting go." There it was. Not loud, not cruel enough for anyone else to notice, but sharp enough to leave a mark. When Daniel came back inside, Rebecca's face changed immediately. She became sweet again, touching his arm, complimenting the cobbler, telling him how peaceful the house was. I watched my son glow under her attention, and I said nothing. That was one of my mistakes. I thought silence was grace. Sometimes it is, but sometimes silence gives the wrong person room to rewrite the truth. Their relationship moved quickly after that. Within a year, they were engaged. Daniel called to tell me on a Thursday morning between meetings. "She said yes," he said. I sat down in my kitchen chair. "Oh, Daniel, congratulations. You're happy." "Of course I'm happy. I want you loved." He breathed out, relieved. "Rebecca thought you might be emotional." I laughed softly. "Well, I am your mother. Emotional comes with the job." He did not laugh. "She's planning most of the wedding," he said. "She has a vision." I soon learned that Rebecca's vision did not include much of me. The wedding would be in Chicago. Formal, elegant, limited guest list, no church basement reception, no homemade anything, no family traditions that felt too small town. When I offered to help pay for something, Rebecca said through Daniel, "That's very sweet, but we already have it handled." Through Daniel. That became the pattern. Rebecca rarely called me herself. She sent messages from Daniel's phone. She answered his calls when I tried to reach him. She managed his calendar, his holidays, his travel, his rest, his diet, his wardrobe, his future. And slowly, she managed his mother too. At first, Daniel made excuses. Rebecca says we're exhausted. Rebecca thinks Christmas in Chicago makes more sense this year. Rebecca already booked us for Thanksgiving with her parents. Rebecca says, "We'll visit another time." Always another time. I began to feel like a door someone kept meaning to open, but never did. When I called, Daniel often seemed distracted. "Mom, can I call you back? Rebecca and I are heading out." "Mom, Rebecca's asleep. I don't want to wake her." "Mom, Rebecca thinks we need some boundaries around phone calls." Boundaries. I stared at that word in my diary for a long time the first night he said it. I had never thought of my love as something that needed a fence around it, but I tried. I called less. I waited longer. I made my voice cheerful even when my chest ached. I sent birthday cards, anniversary cards, Christmas gifts, little notes. Sometimes Daniel thanked me. Sometimes Rebecca did with perfect politeness and no warmth. "Dear Angela, thank you for the gift. Best Rebecca, best. Not love, not family, best." The first real sign that something was wrong came on a Sunday afternoon when I called Daniel and the phone went straight to voicemail. That happened sometimes, so I waited and tried again later. Voicemail. The next day, I sent a text. "Hope you're doing okay. Love you." No answer. 3 days passed. Finally, Daniel called me from his office phone. "Mom, did you need something?" I blinked. "Need something?" "No, sweetheart. I was just checking on you." He sounded confused. "Rebecca said you called repeatedly." "Repeatedly. She said you've been anxious lately." I pressed my hand to my chest. "I called twice, Daniel." There was silence. Then he said, "Oh." Not an apology, not disbelief, just, "Oh." That night, I wrote in my diary, "Something is changing. I can feel it. My son hears my voice now through someone else's interpretation. I did not know then how true that sentence would become. I did not know Rebecca had begun turning my love into pressure, my concern into neediness, my loneliness into manipulation. I did not know she was slowly teaching Daniel to see me as fragile, demanding, embarrassing, and eventually confused. All I knew was that when I looked at my son, I still saw the little boy who promised never to leave me. But when Rebecca looked at me, I believe she saw an obstacle, and obstacles in Rebecca's world were meant to be removed. My 67th birthday fell on a Friday that year. I remember because the bakery had been especially busy that morning, and Mrs. Henderson from church stopped by with a little purple card tucked into her purse. She bought one blueberry muffin, handed me the card with both hands, and said, "Angela, don't you dare spend your birthday alone tonight." I smiled and told her I wouldn't. At the time, I believed that was true. Daniel had mentioned 2 weeks earlier that he might call after work. He did not say he would visit, and I had learned not to hope too loudly anymore. But a phone call was enough for me. Sometimes when you love someone from a distance, you become grateful for crumbs and tell yourself they are a meal. All day, I kept checking my phone. At noon, nothing. At 3, nothing. At 5, I told myself Chicago traffic was probably bad, or maybe he had a late meeting. Daniel's life was full of meetings now. Meetings, clients, dinners, deadlines, flights, calendars, and the kind of important busyness that made a mother feel guilty for needing anything at all. After work, I stopped at the grocery store and bought a small vanilla cake with buttercream roses. It was not my favorite. My favorite was chocolate with raspberry filling, but the vanilla cake was on sale, and one person did not need anything fancy. I also bought a rotisserie chicken, a bag of salad, and a little carton of strawberries. At home, I set the table for 2. I do not know why I did that. Maybe habit, maybe hope. Maybe some foolish part of my heart still imagined Daniel might surprise me, knock on the door with flowers in his hand, and say, "Did you really think I'd forget your birthday, Mom?" I placed one plate at my chair and one across from me, where he used to sit as a boy with syrup on his chin. Then I lit a candle. The house looked soft in the evening light. The little white curtains moved gently over the kitchen window. Outside, the maple tree Michael had planted years ago was turning gold at the edges. I remember standing there and thinking how strange it was that the world could still be beautiful when your heart felt so uncertain. At 6:30, my phone buzzed. I grabbed it so quickly I nearly dropped it, but it was only a pharmacy reminder. I laughed at myself. Then I felt embarrassed, even though no one was there to see me. At 7, I sliced the cake, but did not eat it. At 7:30, I turned the television on for noise. At 8, I called Daniel. It rang once, then went to voicemail. One ring. That meant the phone was either off or I had been sent away. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I left a message. "Hi, sweetheart. It's Mom. I know you're probably busy. I just wanted to hear your voice for a minute. No rush. Call me when you can. I love you." I tried to sound cheerful. I tried not to sound old. That is something no one tells you about aging. It is not only your bones that change. You begin editing your own voice. You try not to sound needy. You try not to sound tired. You try not to sound like someone waiting by a phone in a quiet kitchen with an untouched birthday cake. At 9, I put the chicken in the refrigerator. At 9:30, I blew out the candle. At 10, I sat at the table and sang "Happy Birthday" to myself under my breath. I only got through the first line. Then I stopped. There are kinds of loneliness that make noise. Crying, shouting, breaking things. But there is another kind that sits perfectly still. It folds its hands in its lap. It stares at a second plate across the table and says nothing at all. That was the kind I felt that night. I took the second plate away. Then I opened the drawer beside the sink and pulled out my diary. By then, I had many diaries. Some were packed in boxes in the hallway closet. Some were tied with ribbon. Some had cracked spines and coffee stains. But the one I used that year was dark brown leather with a thin strap that wrapped around it. Daniel had given it to me for Christmas years earlier, back when he still remembered how much I liked writing things down. I sat at the kitchen table and held my pen above the page. For a while, I could not write. I wanted to write the truth. My son forgot my birthday. But the words looked too cruel in my mind, too final, too sharp. If I wrote them down, I feared they would become real in a way I could not soften later. So instead, I wrote, "Daniel must have been busy today. I hope he is eating well. I hope he knows I thought of him all evening." I paused, then added, "When he was little, he used to wake me before sunrise on my birthday because he could not wait to give me his handmade card. One year, he gave me a rock wrapped in tissue paper because he said it was shaped like a heart. I still have it in the blue box upstairs." My hand began to tremble. I closed the diary before tears could fall on the page. The next morning, Daniel did not call, nor did he call on Sunday. By Monday afternoon, I had convinced myself not to mention it. Maybe he had remembered but felt embarrassed. Maybe Rebecca had planned something. Maybe a gift was delayed in the mail. Maybe his phone had been broken. Maybe he had worked all weekend and slept through every reminder. Maybe. That word had become my favorite lie. On Tuesday, I received a card. For one foolish second, when I saw the envelope in the mailbox, my heart lifted. The handwriting was neat and unfamiliar, and the return address was Daniel's apartment in Chicago. I carried it inside like it was something fragile. The card was expensive, thick, elegant, with pale flowers printed on the front. Inside, the message was short. "Angela, wishing you a peaceful birthday week. Best Rebecca and Daniel. Rebecca and Daniel. Not Mom. Not love. Not sorry we missed you." The ink looked like Rebecca's handwriting. Daniel's name sat beside hers like an afterthought. I stood in the hallway holding that card until my arm went numb. Then, because I did not know what else to do, I placed it on the mantel beside the photos of Daniel as a child. There he was, at 7, grinning with missing teeth. There he was, at 13, holding a science fair ribbon. There he was, at 18, in his graduation gown, smiling with his arm around me before Chicago taught him how to stand farther away. That evening, I called him again. This time, Rebecca answered. "Hello, Angela." Her voice was smooth, controlled. "Hi, Rebecca. Is Daniel nearby? Hez in the shower? Oh, could you ask him to call me when he has a moment?" There was a pause. "Is everything all right?" "Yes," I said quickly, too quickly. "I just wanted to thank him for the birthday card." Another pause, longer this time. "Of course. I'll let him know." I waited for her to say something else. Maybe, "Sorry we missed calling." Maybe Daniel felt terrible. Maybe any small kindness. Instead, she said, "He's been under a lot of pressure lately, Angela. Work has been demanding." "I understand. I'm sure you do. I just think it helps him when things stay calm." Instead, she said, "He's been under a lot of pressure lately, Angela. Work has been demanding." "I understand. I'm sure you do. I just think it helps him when things stay calm." Calm. I felt that word press against my chest. "I only wanted to hear from my son on my birthday," I said softly. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of judgment. Then Rebecca said, "I'm sure he meant no harm." That was the way she did it. She made my hurt sound like accusation. She made my longing sound unreasonable. She made herself the calm one, the sensible one, while I became the emotional old mother who needed managing. When Daniel called the next day, his voice was tense. "Mom, Rebecca said you were upset." I closed my eyes. "I wasn't upset, Daniel. She said you sounded upset. I missed you, that's all." He exhaled, and I could hear the impatience he was trying to hide. Mom, I'm sorry. I forgot. Okay. Things have been crazy. The apology should have comforted me. It did not. Because he said it like my birthday was one more task that had slipped between emails. I know you're busy, I said. You always say that, but it still feels like I'm disappointing you. I sat very still. I never want you to feel that way. Then maybe don't make it such a big deal. Such a big deal. I looked across the kitchen at the table where the cake still sat under plastic wrap, drying out one day at a time. All right, I whispered. His voice softened a little. I'll make it up to you. But he did not say when. After we hung up, I went upstairs to the closet and opened the blue box where I kept Daniel's childhood treasures, the paper cards, the school photos, the clay handprint, the heart-shaped rock wrapped once in tissue paper by a little boy who could not wait to celebrate his mother. I held that rock in my palm for a long time. It was cold at first. Then slowly it warmed in my hand. That night, I wrote more than usual. Today, Daniel told me not to make a big deal of my birthday. I know he did not mean to hurt me. I know adulthood is heavy. I know marriage changes a man's priorities. Still, I miss the boy who once thought a rock shaped like a heart was enough to make me happy. Then I wrote something I almost crossed out. I wonder if he would remember me better if someone else were not helping him forget. I stared at that sentence until my eyes blurred. For the first time, I allowed myself to admit what I had been afraid to name. Daniel was not only drifting, he was being guided away. And somewhere in Chicago, I had the terrible feeling that Rebecca knew exactly which reminders to erase. After that birthday, I stopped waiting beside the phone in the same way. I still hoped Daniel would call, of course. A mother does not simply close the door on hope because it hurts her. But something inside me had changed. I no longer sat at the kitchen table staring at the screen until my tea went cold. I no longer made pancakes on Sundays unless I truly wanted them. I no longer let the sound of silence decide whether my day had been good or bad. Instead, I wrote. At first, the diary was only a place to put the feelings I was too proud to say out loud. Then slowly, it became the only place where the truth could live without being corrected by anyone. On the first page of the new diary, I wrote, "This book is not for blame. It is for remembering." I underlined that sentence twice. I did not want to become bitter. Bitterness had taken women I knew and bent them into people who spoke more about wounds than blessings. I had watched loneliness turn into sharpness in church pews and grocery store lines and waiting rooms. I did not want that for myself. So I made a rule. Every time Daniel hurt me, I would write the pain, but I would also write one memory of love. If he did not call, I wrote about the silence. Then I wrote about the time he brought me wildflowers from the school playground because he thought yellow weeds were beautiful. If he sent a short text instead of a real conversation, I wrote about the ache of 3 empty words. Then I wrote about the night he had a fever at 9 years old and kept reaching for my hand in his sleep. If Rebecca answered his phone and told me he was unavailable, I wrote down exactly what she said. Then I wrote the prayer I whispered afterward. That became my rhythm. Truth memory prayer. Some days, that was the only thing keeping me gentle. I began keeping careful records without realizing that was what I was doing. I wrote dates at the top of every entry. I wrote times when I called. I wrote when letters came back unopened. I wrote when birthday cards were acknowledged by Rebecca instead of Daniel. I wrote down every gift I mailed to Chicago and whether anyone told me it arrived. Not because I planned to use it against them. I did not. I was a mother, not a prosecutor. But when everyone around you begins acting as though your feelings are unreasonable, paper becomes a kind of witness. Ink does not roll its eyes. A page does not sigh and say you are too sensitive. A diary does not tell you to calm down. It simply holds what happened. One November, I mailed Daniel a wool scarf I had knitted myself. Dark gray, because Rebecca once said Daniel preferred neutral tones now. I worked on it every evening for 3 weeks, my hands stiff but steady. I wrapped it in silver tissue paper and included a note for the Chicago wind. Love, Mom. 2 weeks passed before I heard anything. Then Rebecca sent a text from Daniel's phone. Scarf arrived. Very thoughtful. Thank you. I stared at the message for a long time. It did not sound like my son. That night, I wrote November 18th. Scarf delivered. Reply came from Daniel's phone, but the words felt like Rebecca's. I wonder if he even saw it. Then I forced myself to add, when Daniel was 12, he wore the red scarf I made him, even though other boys teased him. He told them, "My mom made this. It's better than anything from a store." I smiled when I wrote that part. Then I cried anyway. As months passed, the diary grew heavier. There were entries about missed calls, holidays spent alone, and conversations that ended too quickly. There were entries about the way Daniel's voice changed when Rebecca was nearby. Softer with her, sharper with me. There were entries about my own shame too. I wrote honestly about it because I knew memory becomes dangerous when it only protects itself. December 24th. I wanted to call Daniel tonight, but stopped myself. I did not want Rebecca to say I was interrupting their evening. Is this what motherhood becomes? Waiting for permission to love your own child. January 7th. Daniel called for 6 minutes. He sounded tired. I asked if he was eating well. He said, "Mom, I'm not a kid." I apologized. I should not have. February 2nd. I mailed Emily a little stuffed rabbit for her birthday. Rebecca sent a thank you card signed by Emily, but the handwriting was clearly Rebecca's. Does Emily know I love her, Emily? My granddaughter. She was born on a snowy morning in Chicago, and Daniel called me from the hospital, sounding dazed with joy. "Mom," he whispered, "she's here." I cried right there in the bakery storage room. Rebecca did not want visitors for the first month. Then 1 month became 3. By the time I held Emily, she was already lifting her head and staring at the world with serious little eyes. I remember whispering, "Hello, little love. I'm your grandmother." Rebecca corrected me gently. "We're using Grandma Morris. It sounds cleaner." Cleaner? Even then, I smiled and nodded. But in my diary, I wrote, "I met Emily today. She has Daniel's eyes. Rebecca wants me called Grandma Morris." That is all right. Names matter less than love, though I wonder why she keeps choosing distance even in small things. As Emily grew, I mailed books, sweaters, birthday cards, little notes with stickers inside. I rarely knew if she received them. Sometimes Daniel mentioned one casually months later. "Oh, Emily liked that book you sent." Those words would carry me for days. I began saving copies of letters before I mailed them. I do not know why at first. Perhaps because a quiet instinct told me that things were disappearing before they reached the people I loved. I bought a small folder from the dollar store and labeled it sent. Inside, I placed handwritten drafts, postal receipts, and little notes to myself. March 10th. Sent Daniel a card for his promotion. April 3rd. Sent Emily Easter stickers. May 21st. Sent Daniel old photo of him and Michael at the park. June 1st. No reply. When I looked at those records, I felt foolish. What kind of mother keeps proof that she loves her son? But another voice inside me answered, a mother whose love is being erased. That thought frightened me, so I hid the diary. Not because I was ashamed of it, but because I began to understand that Rebecca would not like what I had written. Not the insults, there were none. Not the accusations, I had written few. What would upset her was the truth. The dates, the patterns, the difference between what happened and what Daniel was being told. I had an old cedar box upstairs in my bedroom closet. Michael had given it to me on our 10th anniversary. It still smelled faintly of wood and time. Inside, I kept important things: our marriage certificate, Daniel's baby bracelet from the hospital, Michael's last Father's Day card, and the heart-shaped rock Daniel had given me as a boy. I placed the diary inside that box. Then I bought a small brass lock. The first time I clicked it shut, I felt ridiculous. An old woman locking up her feelings. But after that, I slept better. Every night I took the diary out, wrote, "Let the truth breathe for a little while," then returned it to the box. I wrapped the key in a handkerchief and tucked it behind a loose wooden panel inside my dresser drawer. Michael had shown me that panel years ago with a grin, saying, "Every old house deserves one secret." I never imagined that secret would hold the story of my motherhood. As the years continued, the diary became less like a notebook and more like a conversation with the woman I was trying not to lose. I wrote to remind myself I was not crazy. I was not demanding. I was not confused. I was a mother watching someone place fog between her and her child, and still I refused to hate Daniel. That mattered to me. Whenever anger rose, I wrote until I found grief underneath it. Whenever resentment whispered, I answered it with memory. I wrote about Daniel's first steps, his broken arm, his school choir, his promise on the porch. I wrote about Michael and how proud he would have been. I wrote prayers for Rebecca too, though some nights they were short. Lord, soften her heart. Some nights, that was all I could manage. But beneath the prayers, beneath the memories, beneath every careful sentence, a quiet suspense began building inside me. One day, I thought Daniel will need to know. Not because I wanted him punished, because I wanted him free. Free from the lies. Free from the version of me Rebecca was building. Free from the belief that his mother had become nothing but a burden, a problem, a fading old woman who called too much and remembered too little. So I kept writing, page after page, year after year. And the more Rebecca tried to make me disappear, the more faithfully the diary remembered me. The winter I got sick was one of the coldest I could remember. Columbus had been covered in ice for 3 days, the kind that made every tree branch look like glass, and every sidewalk feel like a warning. I had been coughing since Christmas, but like many women of my generation, I told myself it was nothing. A little cold, a little age, a little too much time spent walking from the bus stop to the bakery in freezing wind. I drank tea with honey. I rubbed vapor ointment on my chest. I wrapped myself in Michael's old robe and slept sitting up in the armchair because lying flat made me wheeze. But by the second week of January, even I could no longer pretend. I was in the kitchen when the room tilted. One moment, I was reaching for a mug. The next, my hand was on the counter, and the floor seemed to move underneath me. I remember thinking, not yet. Not here. Not alone. Then I woke up to the sound of Mrs. Henderson's voice calling my name. She had come by to bring soup because I missed church that Sunday. When I did not answer the door, she used the spare key I had given her years ago. "Angela Morris, you scared the life out of me," she said, but her voice trembled. An ambulance came. I remember the red flash of lights on my ceiling. I remember a young paramedic asking me questions while fastening something around my arm. I remember trying to say Daniel's name, but my throat felt full of sand. At the hospital, they told me I had pneumonia. "Not mild either," the doctor said, looking over his glasses. "You should have come in sooner." I smiled weakly. I've been told I'm stubborn. He did not smile back. Stubborn can get dangerous at your age. At your age. That phrase followed me into the hospital room like a shadow. Mrs. Henderson called Daniel from the chair beside my bed. I heard her leave a message first, then another. Then she sent a text. By evening, Rebecca called back. Not Daniel. Rebecca. Mrs. Henderson stepped into the hallway to talk, but hospital curtains are thin, and fear sharpens the ears. Yes, she's stable, Mrs. Henderson said, but Daniel should know his mother is in the hospital. There was a pause. Then, Mrs. Henderson's voice changed. No, I don't believe she's confused. She knew exactly where she was when they brought her in. Another pause. I turned my head toward the doorway. Mrs. Henderson lowered her voice. Rebecca, I'm telling you this because he is her son. When she returned, her face was tight. Daniel will call when he can, she said. I wanted to ask what Rebecca had said, but I was too tired. Breathing felt like work. Even lifting my hand to adjust the blanket took effort. That night, Daniel did not call. The next day, I asked the nurse to help me charge my phone. There were no missed calls from Daniel. No text. Nothing. I tried to tell myself he was busy. I tried to tell myself Rebecca was handling things. I tried to tell myself a good wife would not keep a husband from his sick mother. But deep down, I felt that old, cold truth pressing against my ribs. Something was wrong. On the third day, I woke from a nap to voices outside my room. One voice was the nurse's, gentle but firm. She's awake at times, tired but oriented. Then Rebecca's voice. Daniel is very concerned she may not recognize him. My eyes opened. The room was dim. A lunch tray sat untouched on the rolling table beside me. For a moment, I wondered if fever had twisted the words in my ears. The nurse said, Mrs. Morris has been answering questions clearly. Rebecca sighed softly as if carrying a burden. She has been declining for a while. Daniel and I didn't want to alarm anyone, but she forgets conversations, repeats herself, gets emotional. She even calls at odd times and doesn't remember doing it. My hand curled around the bedsheet. No, the nurse said, that's not what I've observed here. Well, Rebecca replied, her tone sweet but edged. She's very good at masking it. Older people can do that, especially around strangers. Strangers. I had raised a son, buried a husband, paid a mortgage, worked 2 jobs, balanced bills down to nickels. And somehow, this woman was standing outside my hospital room, telling people I was no longer reliable inside my own mind. Then I heard Daniel. His voice came through the phone, faint but clear. So she really doesn't want visitors. Rebecca answered before the nurse could. Daniel, sweetheart? I told you. She's overwhelmed. When Mrs. Henderson called, your mother was already agitated. The nurse said she needs rest. Showing up suddenly might upset her. My heart began beating so hard the monitor beside me quickened. Daniel sounded torn. But she's my mom. I know, Rebecca said. And you love her. But you have that presentation tomorrow, and she may not even understand you're there. Do you want your last clear image of her to be like that? Last clear image. I wanted to shout. I wanted to sit up and say, Daniel, I am here. I know you. I know your voice. I remember every scar on your knees, every fever, every school song, every promise you ever made on that porch. But when I tried to speak, I coughed so violently, my chest burned. The nurse hurried in. Mrs. Morris, easy now. I reached toward the door. My son, I whispered. She leaned closer. What was that, my son? Daniel, I want to see him. Her face softened. I'll make a note. But by then, Rebecca's voice was gone. Daniel's voice was gone. and I was left with a hospital room full of machines and the terrible realization that my son believed I was losing myself. That evening, Mrs. Henderson sat beside me with her Bible in her lap. "Angela," she said carefully, "has Rebecca ever said anything to you about memory problems?" I turned my head toward the window. "No. Daniel seemed to think—" She stopped. I looked at her. "That I'm confused." Her eyes filled with pity. I hated that pity. Not because it was cruel, but because it made the lie feel real. "I know who I am," I said. "I know you do. I know who my son is. Yes, I know what she's doing." Mrs. Henderson took my hand, but neither of us said more, because saying it out loud meant accepting that Rebecca had not merely pushed me to the edges of Daniel's life. She was now trying to remove me from my own story. The doctor kept me in the hospital for 6 days. Daniel called once. It was late, and Rebecca was on the line too. I could tell because his voice had that carefulness it always had when she was near. "Mom." I closed my eyes. "Daniel, how are you feeling?" "I'd feel better if I could see you." Silence. Then softly he said, "Rebecca said you asked for no visitors." My hand tightened around the phone. "I never said that." Another silence. In the background, I heard Rebecca murmur something. Daniel exhaled. "Mom, I don't want to upset you. You are not upsetting me. I heard you've been having some confusion." The word landed like a slap. "Daniel, I have pneumonia, not dementia. I know, but Rebecca said this has been happening for a while." I stared at the ceiling tiles. A crack ran across one of them, thin and jagged like a fault line. "What exactly has she said?" He sounded uncomfortable. "That you forget calls. That you repeat things. That you get angry when she tries to help." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the lie was so complete, so carefully dressed as concern, that I could see how easy it had been for him to believe it. "Daniel," I said slowly, "have I ever forgotten your birthday?" He did not answer. "Have I ever forgotten your favorite meal? Your father's middle name? The song you sang in 5th grade? The way you broke your left wrist falling off your bike?" "Mom, I remember everything." My voice cracked on the last word. In the background, Rebecca's voice grew sharper. "Daniel, she needs rest. He said, Mom, we'll talk when you're better." Then the call ended. Not goodbye, not I love you, just the empty tone of a line gone dead. I lay there with the phone against my chest. For the first time in years, I did not try to excuse him. I did not write, maybe he is busy. I did not write, maybe Rebecca misunderstood. I did not write, maybe next Sunday. That night, when the nurse dimmed the lights and the hallway quieted, I asked for my purse. Inside was the small notebook I carried when I could not bring the diary with me. My hand shook as I wrote, but I forced every word onto the page. January 16th. Daniel believes I am forgetting him. Rebecca told him I am confused, declining emotional, and possibly unable to recognize him. I heard her say, I did not want visitors. That is false. I wanted my son. I still want my son. I paused, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. Then I wrote the sentence that would one day break Daniel completely. I still remember the first day I held him. 6 pounds 11 ounces. Dark hair. One hand curled under his cheek. Michael cried before I did. I have not forgotten my son. I fear my son is being taught to forget me. When I returned home from the hospital, the house felt colder than before. Mrs. Henderson helped me inside. She placed my medication on the counter made soup and told me not to climb the stairs alone. But that night after she left, I did climb them. Slowly, one step at a time. I went to my bedroom closet, took out the cedar box, and unlocked it. The diary was waiting. I placed the hospital notebook inside beside it. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the little brass key in my palm. Until that illness, the diary had been my comfort. After that illness, it became something else. A record, a witness, a defense against being erased. And as I locked the cedar box again, I understood with a clarity that frightened me. If Rebecca could convince Daniel I had forgotten him, she could convince him of anything. I had been home from the hospital for 3 weeks when I first heard them discuss selling my house. Not directly, of course. People like Rebecca rarely said cruel things in a straight line. She preferred soft words, careful tones, phrases that sounded responsible enough to hide the knife beneath them. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. Daniel had finally agreed to visit Columbus. Not alone. Rebecca came with him, and Emily too, though I could tell Rebecca had not wanted to bring her. Emily was 10 by then, all long legs and curious eyes, with Daniel's soft brown gaze and a seriousness that reminded me of him as a child. The moment Emily stepped through my front door, she ran to me. "Grandma Morris!" She wrapped her arms around my waist before Rebecca could stop her. I held her close, breathing in the sweet smell of strawberry shampoo and winter air. "Oh, my little love," I whispered. Rebecca's smile tightened. "Careful, Emily. Grandma Morris is still recovering." I looked over Emily's head and met Rebecca's eyes. "I'm not made of glass." Daniel gave a small laugh, but it sounded nervous. He kissed my cheek and said, "You look better, Mom." Better than what I wanted to ask. Better than the confused woman Rebecca had described. Better than the mother he had decided not to visit in the hospital. But I only smiled. "I'm glad you came." For a little while, the visit almost felt normal. I made coffee. Emily wandered around the living room looking at old photographs. She stopped in front of one picture of Daniel at 8 years old, holding a baseball bat nearly as tall as he was. "Dad looked funny," she said. Daniel chuckled. "Hey, I was a very serious athlete. You sat on the bench most of the season?" I said gently. For one beautiful second, Daniel laughed like himself. A real laugh. The kind that opened his face and brought my boy back into the room. Then Rebecca touched his arm, and the laugh disappeared. "Daniel was always meant for bigger things," she said. The words were polished, but I heard the correction underneath them. "Do not let this house make you small again." After lunch, I grew tired. I hated that my body betrayed me that way, but pneumonia had left me weaker than I wanted anyone to know. I told them I would rest for a few minutes in the bedroom downstairs, the one I had been using since climbing stairs became difficult. "Of course," Rebecca said quickly. Too quickly. "Well, clean up." I almost laughed at the idea of Rebecca washing dishes in my kitchen, but I thanked her and went to lie down. The bedroom door did not latch properly unless pulled hard. I had meant to fix it for years. That day, I left it slightly open. At first, I heard only the clink of plates and the low hum of voices. Then Rebecca said, "Daniel, we need to talk about the house." My eyes opened. Daniel's voice was quiet. "Not now." "Yes, now. This is exactly when. You saw her today. She's frail." Frail. I looked down at my hands resting on the quilt. The skin was thinner than it used to be. The veins raised the knuckles swollen. But those hands had built a life. They had held Daniel through fevers, kneaded bread at dawn, scrubbed office floors at midnight, signed mortgage checks, wiped tears, packed lunches, and written every truth no one wanted spoken. Frail was not the word I would have chosen. Daniel sighed. "She just got out of the hospital." "That's my point. There was a pause, then the sound of a chair moving. Rebecca lowered her voice, but not enough. This house is too much for her. The stairs, the old wiring, the uneven porch, the neighborhood. You know she can't keep managing it. She's lived here for 40 years. Exactly. And she's attached to it emotionally, which means she won't make a rational decision. I held my breath. Daniel said, "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we start looking into assisted living." The room seemed to shrink around me. Assisted living. I had nothing against such places. Some were kind, some were necessary. But Rebecca did not say the words with compassion. She said them like one might say storage unit. Daniel did not answer. Rebecca continued, "If we sell the house, there would be enough equity to cover a good facility. Maybe even help with Emily's school fund after expenses." Emily's school fund. There it was. The real shape of the thought. My house, my memories, my husband's work, my life reduced to equity. Daniel said, "I don't know if Mom would agree." Rebecca gave a soft, humorless laugh. "Daniel, your mother isn't thinking clearly. She may have lucid days, but you heard the doctor's concerns." My body went cold. The doctor had never said that. Not once. Daniel's voice changed. "The doctor said that—" Rebecca hesitated only a fraction of a second. "He implied it. The nurse too. And Mrs. Henderson is too emotionally involved to be objective." I pressed my hand over my mouth. She was not only lying about me now. She was building a whole world around the lie. A world where doctors doubted me, neighbors pitied me, my son worried over me, and Rebecca stood in the center as the calm, reasonable woman willing to do the hard thing. Daniel said, "Mom would hate leaving this house." "She may hate it now," Rebecca replied. "But later, she might not even remember it." I closed my eyes. That sentence hurt more than the word frail. This house held every version of me. Newlywed Angela painting the kitchen yellow. Young mother Angela rocking Daniel beside the window during thunderstorms. Widow Angela standing at the sink after Michael's funeral, wondering how to survive. Tired Angela making pancakes while flour snowed onto the floor. Older Angela writing by lamplight because no one else believed the truth. And Rebecca had just suggested that one day I might not remember it. Daniel was silent so long I thought perhaps he had left the room. Then he said, "The house would be mine eventually, right?" My heart stopped. Not because of greed in his voice. There was no greed. That was what made it worse. He sounded confused, almost ashamed, like a child repeating something an adult had taught him. Rebecca answered carefully, "Most likely. You're her only child." "Most likely." I opened my eyes and stared toward the cracked doorway. They did not know. For all Rebecca's planning, all her polished assumptions, all her quiet measurements of my life, she did not know the one thing Michael and I had done years earlier after a neighbor lost her home to a family dispute. The house was not arranged the way she believed. Michael had insisted on paperwork after his first health scare. He said love was not enough when money entered a room. At the time, I had told him he was being dramatic. He had kissed my forehead and said, "Angie, one day, you'll thank me for being dramatic." I had not thought of that conversation in years. Now, lying under a quilt while my son and daughter-in-law discussed selling my home, I silently thanked my husband. Daniel said, "I don't want to force her." Rebecca's voice softened, dangerous in its tenderness. "You wouldn't be forcing her. You'd be protecting her. Good sons make hard decisions when their parents can't." Good sons. I could almost see her placing that phrase into his hands like a weapon. Then Emily's voice cut through the room. "Are you making Grandma Morris move?" Silence. I heard Rebecca inhale sharply. "Emily, sweetheart, you shouldn't sneak up on adult conversations." "I wasn't sneaking," Emily said. "I was getting my book." Daniel spoke gently. No one is making Grandma do anything right now. Right now? Emily asked. No one answered. A moment later, small footsteps came down the hall. The bedroom door opened wider and Emily slipped inside. Her face was pale. Grandma? She whispered. Are you awake? I turned toward her. Yes, baby. Her eyes filled. I don't want you to move. I opened my arm, and she came to me carefully, as if afraid Rebecca might be right, and I might break. I held her against me. This is my home, I whispered into her hair. I'm not going anywhere today. She pulled back. But later, I looked at her sweet, worried face and felt something settle inside me. A quietness. Not surrender. Decision. Well, see, I said. That evening, after Daniel and Rebecca left, I did not cry. I expected to. I thought the tears would come the moment their car disappeared down the street. Instead, I stood in the living room, looking at the photographs on the mantel, and felt a calm so deep it frightened me. There comes a moment when a woman who has spent years being gentle realizes gentleness alone will not save her. I went upstairs, slowly holding the banister one step at a time. My chest still ached from the pneumonia, but I did not stop. In my bedroom, I unlocked the cedar box. I took out the diary, the hospital notebook, the folder of letters, the postal receipts, and the old envelope containing the property documents Michael had arranged. Then I placed everything on the bed. For the first time, I did not see them as memories. I saw them as evidence. I sat down and wrote, February 8th. Today, I heard Daniel and Rebecca discuss selling my house and moving me into assisted living. Rebecca said, I am not thinking clearly. She said doctors implied concerns that were never stated to me. She said later I might not remember this house. Daniel asked if the house would eventually be his. I do not believe he understands what is happening. I do not believe he knows what Rebecca has done. I paused. My hand did not tremble this time. Then I added, Tomorrow, I will call Thomas Walker. Thomas had been Michael's lawyer and oldest friend. He was retired now, living outside Dayton, but every Christmas, he still sent me a card with shaky handwriting and a note that said, If you ever need anything, anything, call me. For years, I had not wanted to bother him. Now I reached for the phone, because Rebecca had made one mistake. She thought silence meant I had no power. She thought age meant I had no memory. She thought love meant I would let them take everything quietly. But she did not know about Michael's paperwork. She did not know about the diary. And she certainly did not know that the woman she called frail had just decided to fight back. The next morning, I called Thomas Walker before I could talk myself out of it. His number was still written on an old address card tucked inside my kitchen drawer. The same drawer where I kept rubber bands, batteries, takeout menus, and birthday candles from years I had celebrated other people more than myself. My fingers hovered over the phone for a long time. I had always been the kind of woman who hated asking for help. Maybe it came from losing Michael young. Maybe it came from raising Daniel alone. Maybe it came from all those years of smiling while carrying groceries, bills, grief, and worry with the same two hands. When you spend decades being strong people, forget strength can get tired. But that morning, I was not calling because I was tired. I was calling because I was awake. Thomas answered on the fourth ring. Walker residence. His voice was older, thinner, but unmistakable. Thomas, I said. It's Angela Morris. There was a pause, then warmth flooded his voice. Angela. Good Lord, it's good to hear you. Are you all right? I looked around my kitchen at the table where Daniel had once done homework at the window where winter light fell pale across the floor. "No," I said, "but I intend to be." He did not rush me. That was the first mercy. I told him everything. Not all at once. The truth came out in pieces like something pulled carefully from a deep drawer. I told him about the hospital, about Rebecca telling Daniel I was confused, about the phone call, about hearing them discuss assisted living and selling the house, about the diary, the letters, the records I had kept without realizing I was building a wall against erasure. When I finished, the line was quiet. Then Thomas said, "Angela, I want you to listen to me carefully." I sat straighter. "You are not overreacting." My eyes filled so suddenly I had to press my fingers to them. Those 4 words did something to me. For years, Rebecca had made my pain feel excessive. Daniel's discomfort had made my questions feel unfair. Even my own pride had whispered, "Don't make trouble. Don't be dramatic. Don't become the old woman everyone has to manage." But Thomas, with one steady sentence, handed me back my sanity. He continued, "Do you still have the property documents Michael and I prepared?" "Yes." "The trust papers?" "Yes." "The medical directive?" "I believe so." "The deed transfer addendum?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure what it's called, but I have an envelope with Michael's notes." "Good. Don't move anything from the house without making copies. And don't sign anything Daniel or Rebecca brings you. Not a care agreement, not a release, not a temporary authorization, not even a napkin." Despite everything, I almost smiled. "Thomas, I mean it." "I know." His voice softened. "Can you come to Dayton?" I looked down at my hands. Driving that far alone might not be wise right now. "Then I'll come to you. You're retired." "I'm old, Angela, not dead." That time I did smile. Thomas arrived 2 days later in a dark sedan driven by his niece Margaret. He stepped out wearing a wool coat, leaning on a cane, his white hair thinner than I remembered, but his eyes still sharp behind square glasses. When I opened the door, he looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Michael would be furious." That was all it took. I cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just the kind of tears that come when someone remembers the person who would have protected you if he were still alive. Thomas patted my shoulder awkwardly. He had never been comfortable with tears. Now, he said, "let's make him useful from the grave." We sat at my kitchen table with coffee and stacks of documents spread between us. The cedar box sat beside him. My diary was inside it, still locked. The folder of letters lay open. Postal receipts, copied notes returned, envelopes, birthday cards, hospital discharge papers. Thomas examined everything with the patience of a man who believed paper could tell the truth when people refused to. After nearly an hour, he leaned back. "Angela," he said, "Michael was thorough." I swallowed. He always worried. He planned. There was pride in Thomas's voice. He tapped the property documents. "Your house is protected in a revocable trust with you as the primary beneficiary during your lifetime. Daniel does not own it. He cannot sell it. Rebecca cannot touch it. Even if someone tried to claim you were incapacitated, there are safeguards." My breath left me slowly. I knew Michael had arranged something, but I didn't understand all of it. "That's what lawyers are for." He looked over his glasses. "And old husbands who don't trust the future." I touched the edge of the paper. For the first time since overhearing Rebecca, my house felt solid again beneath me. Thomas continued, "Now your current documents name Daniel as successor trustee if you become incapacitated." My heart tightened. But he added, "raising a hand that can be updated while you are legally competent." And based on my conversation with you, your records and what I see today, you are very much competent." The word landed gently. Competent. Not confused, not declining, not frail. Competent. "What do I do?" I asked. "We update your legal documents. We add an independent co-trustee. I can recommend someone reputable. We revise your medical directive so Daniel cannot make decisions alone if there is concern of outside influence. We document your wishes clearly. We make copies of your diary records not because we plan to attack your son, but because we may need to prove a pattern." I looked toward the hallway where old family photos lined the wall. "I don't want to hurt Daniel." Thomas' face softened. "Angela, truth is not cruelty." I stared at him. He said it again slower. "Truth is not cruelty." I had spent years protecting Daniel from my hurt. I thought that was love. Maybe part of it was. But another part of me had been protecting myself from the terrible possibility that my son might choose not to see me. Thomas pointed to the cedar box. "Is the diary in there?" "Yes. May I read some of it?" My instinct was to pull it closer. The diary was my private heart. It held sentences I had written in the dark prayers I had whispered with shaking hands, memories of Daniel no one else had earned the right to touch. But then I thought of Rebecca saying I might not remember my own house. I unlocked the box. The brass key felt warm in my palm. I handed Thomas the diary. He opened it carefully. He did not read like a curious man. He read like a witness. Every few pages, his jaw tightened. Once he removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he reached the hospital entry, he stopped. "Angela," he said quietly, "this matters. I wrote it because I had no one else to tell. That's often why the most important records exist." We spent the afternoon organizing everything. Margaret made copies at a print shop downtown. Thomas dictated notes into a small recorder. I signed nothing that day. He insisted I take time to read every draft once prepared. "No pressure," he said. "No fear. That's how we do this." That evening after he left, I stood in my bedroom and looked at the cedar box. For years I had hidden it because I was afraid of what Rebecca would do if she found the truth. Now I hid it because the truth had power. Over the next 2 weeks, Thomas worked quickly. He mailed drafts by certified mail. He called to explain each page. He arranged for a notary to come to my house. He helped me appoint a professional fiduciary as co-trustee if I became unable to manage my affairs. He updated my healthcare directive so that Mrs. Henderson and Thomas's niece Margaret would have documented authority to confirm my wishes if anyone questioned them. Daniel remained in my documents, but not alone. That distinction mattered. I was not cutting him out. I was refusing to let Rebecca use him as a door. When the final papers were signed, Thomas placed them in a blue folder and slid it across my kitchen table. "You are protected," he said. I touched the folder, but did not open it. "Will Daniel hate me?" Thomas sighed. "He may be angry at first. People often confuse boundaries with betrayal when they benefited from you having none." I looked down. Daniel was a good boy. "I know. I think he's still in there." Thomas nodded. "Then these papers may help him come back." That night, I opened my diary and wrote differently than I had in years. Not with sorrow, not with apology, with steadiness. March 4th. Today, I signed the updated trust documents, medical directive, and protection papers. Daniel is still my son. I still love him, but love cannot require me to disappear. Michael protected me before I knew I would need protecting. Thomas says truth is not cruelty. I am trying to believe him. Then I added one more line. Rebecca believes I have been quietly fading. She does not know I have been quietly preparing. I closed the diary and locked it away. For the first time in a long while, the click of the brass lock did not sound like fear. It sounded like a promise. The dinner invitation came 2 weeks after I signed the updated papers. Daniel called on a Wednesday evening just as I was folding laundry in the living room. His name lit up my phone, and for one moment, my heart reacted before my mind could stop it. That was the hardest part. No matter how much pain had passed between us, some part of me still became the mother of a little boy whenever my son called. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hi, Daniel." He cleared his throat. "Rebecca and I were thinking maybe you could come to Chicago this Saturday, just for dinner." I sat down slowly. "Dinner? Yeah, nothing formal. We thought it would be good to talk." Those words carried weight. Good to talk. For years I had wanted him to say that. I had imagined real conversations, gentle apologies, open hands. But now, after everything I had overheard, after the hospital lies, after the documents Thomas had prepared, I no longer heard only hope in my son's voice. I heard purpose. What would we be talking about? I asked. Another pause. "Just family things," he said. "Your recovery. The house. The future. The future." I looked toward the cedar box in the hallway closet. Inside it rested my diary copies of letters, the hospital notebook, and the new documents Thomas had helped me sign. "I see," I said. Daniel's voice softened. "Mom, I just want to make sure you're safe." It was the kind of sentence that should have comforted me. Once it would have. But Rebecca had taught me that safety could become a beautiful word for control. "I appreciate that. Rebecca's making dinner," he added, as if that proved something. I almost smiled. "That's kind of her. Emily wants to see you too." That was the part that made me say yes. On Saturday, Mrs. Henderson drove me to the bus station, but Thomas had arranged for Margaret to meet me in Chicago. "No traveling alone into a situation you don't fully trust," he had said. I told him he sounded like a bodyguard. He told me he sounded like a lawyer who had lived long enough to recognize a setup. Before I left, I placed a copy of the updated papers in my purse. Not the originals. Thomas had been clear about that. I also carried a sealed envelope he had prepared. "Do not open this unless they ask you to sign something," he said. "What is it?" A polite refusal with teeth. That sounded like Thomas. Daniel and Rebecca lived in a sleek townhouse north of downtown, with tall windows and gray furniture that looked too expensive to sit on. Everything inside seemed chosen to impress someone who might never visit. The kitchen counters shone. The flowers on the table matched the napkins. Even the family photos looked professionally arranged. Emily opened the door before anyone else could. "Grandma Morris." She threw her arms around me, and I bent carefully to hold her. Rebecca appeared behind her, wearing a soft blue dress and a smile that belonged in a magazine. "Angela, you made it." I did. Daniel came next. He hugged me gently, too gently, as though still unsure whether I was fragile or simply old. I let him. "You look good, Mom," he said. "Thank you." Dinner smelled wonderful. Roast salmon, asparagus, rice pilaf, lemon sauce in a little white bowl. Rebecca moved around the table with smooth confidence, asking if I needed a cushion, if the room was too cold, if the lighting bothered my eyes. Every question sounded caring. Every question reminded everyone I was old. Emily sat beside me and whispered, "I saved you the seat next to me." "That's the best seat in the house," I whispered back. For the first half hour, nothing happened. We ate. Daniel asked about my medication. Rebecca mentioned a wellness center she had researched. Emily told me about her school project on family history and asked if I had any old pictures of her grandfather Michael. "I have a whole box," I said. Daniel looked up at the name Michael. For a moment, something passed across his face. Grief, maybe? Or memory? Then Rebecca set down her fork. That actually brings us to something important. The air changed. Daniel took a sip of water and would not look directly at me. Rebecca folded her hands. Angela, please know this comes from love. I had learned to distrust any sentence that began that way. She continued. After your hospitalization, Daniel and I have been very concerned about you living alone in that house. I looked at my son. Are you concerned, Daniel? He shifted. I am, Mom. Because of the pneumonia. Because of everything. Everything was Rebecca's favorite kind of evidence. Large enough to sound serious, vague enough to avoid proof. Rebecca reached toward a folder beside her plate. Of course there was a folder. Cream-colored neat waiting. We found a beautiful assisted living community near us, she said. Not a nursing home. Nothing like that. More like an upscale residence with support. Emily's fork stopped moving. Daniel said, You'd be closer to us. To you, I repeated. Yes. Rebecca opened the folder and slid a brochure toward me. Smiling, silver-haired people stood in a garden laughing over cups of coffee. It has activities, she said. Transportation, medication management, memory support, if that ever becomes necessary. There it was again. Memory. I placed my hands in my lap so they would not see them tighten. And my house, I asked. Rebecca's voice remained light. Well, that would be part of the transition conversation. Daniel finally looked at me. Mom, maintaining it is a lot. If we sold it, the money could make sure you're comfortable. Comfortable. I thought of the maple tree Michael planted, Daniel's height marks on the pantry door, the worn step where my husband used to sit and tie his work boots, the kitchen floor where flour had once snowed. I am comfortable in my home, I said. Rebecca smiled sadly as if I had confirmed her fears. We knew this would be emotional. No, I said calmly. It is not emotional. It is clear. Daniel frowned. Mom, nobody is trying to take anything from you. I looked at him for a long moment. My son, my boy, the child who once promised to buy me a house with no cold air. Then why is there a folder on the table? His face flushed. Rebecca intervened. Preparation is not pressure. Sometimes it is. The room went quiet. Emily looked from me to her father, her eyes wide. Rebecca closed the brochure halfway. Angela, we are not asking you to decide everything tonight. But there are some preliminary forms Daniel thought you might review. Daniel's head turned slightly toward her. I noticed that. The small surprise. The way his mouth opened as if he had not expected papers to appear tonight. Rebecca removed several pages from the folder and placed them before me. These simply allow Daniel to speak with professionals on your behalf, she said. Care coordinators, real estate consultants, financial advisors. Very standard. I did not touch the papers. What kind of authorization? Daniel leaned forward. It's just so I can help Mom. Did you read them? His eyes flicked down. Rebecca answered. We both reviewed them, but Daniel's face told me enough. He had not. I reached into my purse and removed the sealed envelope Thomas had given me. I placed it on the table beside Rebecca's papers. What's that? She asked. A document from my attorney. For the first time all evening, her smile faltered. Your attorney? Yes. Thomas Walker. He handled Michael's estate years ago. Daniel looked startled. Mom, you talked to a lawyer, I did. Rebecca's voice sharpened slightly. Why would you need a lawyer? I met her eyes. Because people have been discussing my home, my health, and my future, as if I am not still here. No one spoke. I opened Thomas's envelope and removed the letter. My hands were steady. This says I will not sign any third-party authorization, care transition document, real estate, consultation, agreement, financial release, or medical access form unless my attorney reviews it first. Rebecca stared at the letter. Daniel looked at her, then at me. Mom, we weren't trying to trick you. I believe even now that Daniel meant those words. So I answered him, not her. Then you should have no problem with me protecting myself. His face changed. Something like shame moved through it. Rebecca gathered the papers quickly. This feels unnecessarily hostile. No, I said. Hostile would be telling my son I am too confused to know what I want. Daniel froze. Rebecca's eyes flashed. I saw it then, the first crack in her control. Angela, she said carefully, this is exactly the kind of emotional escalation we've been worried about. I turned to Daniel. Ask me something. He blinked. What? Ask me something only your mother would remember. Mom, don't. Ask me. The room held its breath. I leaned forward, my voice quiet. Ask me what you said the night before you left for college. Ask me what your father called you when you were born. Ask me where the scar on your left wrist came from. Ask me what you gave me for my 43rd birthday wrapped in tissue paper. Daniel's eyes filled with confusion, then something deeper. Memory. Emily whispered. What did he give you? I looked at her, a rock shaped like a heart. Daniel looked down at his plate. Rebecca stood abruptly. I think we should stop this conversation. I looked back at her. For once, Rebecca, I agree. I rose slowly. Daniel moved as if to help me, but I shook my head. I can stand. Margaret was waiting outside in her car, just as Thomas had arranged. Before I left, Emily ran to me and hugged me hard. Are you mad at Daddy? She whispered. I kissed her hair. No, sweetheart. I'm waiting for him to remember who he is. On the ride back, I did not cry. I looked out at the Chicago lights and thought of Daniel's face when I mentioned the heart-shaped rock. For the first time in years, Rebecca had not been quick enough to cover his memory. That night, after I returned home, I unlocked the cedar box and wrote, March 22nd, dinner at Daniel and Rebecca's. They attempted to have me review authorization papers. I refused under attorney guidance. Rebecca lost composure when challenged. Daniel seemed surprised by the papers. Important he remembered the rock. Not fully, perhaps, but something in him moved. Then I paused, listening to the quiet house around me. I added I signed nothing they gave me, but I believe tonight something else began. 3 days after the dinner in Chicago, I knew Rebecca had come into my house. At first, it was only a feeling. The air was different when I stepped through the front door after my doctor's appointment. Not colder, not warmer, just disturbed. A woman who has lived in the same house for 40 years knows when silence has been touched by someone else. Mrs. Henderson had driven me to the appointment that morning. We stopped afterward for soup, and by the time she brought me home, the afternoon sun was leaning across the porch. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and paused. Nothing looked obviously wrong. The framed photos still sat on the mantel. The folded quilt still rested over the back of the sofa. The mail was on the small table by the door. But something inside me tightened. Angela, Mrs. Henderson asked behind me. You all right? I'm not sure. She followed my gaze around the living room. Do you think someone came in? I don't know. That was not entirely true. I knew. I simply did not yet have proof. We checked the kitchen first. Nothing missing. Then the hallway closet. The blue folder Thomas had given me was still tucked where I had hidden it behind a stack of old recipe books. My purse was untouched. My jewelry box upstairs still held the few pieces I owned. Michael's wedding band. My mother's brooch, a silver necklace Daniel had bought me with his first paycheck. Then I opened my bedroom closet. The cedar box was there. But it had been moved, only an inch, maybe less. Anyone else would have missed it. But I had placed that box in the same back left corner for years, angled slightly, because the floorboard beneath it was uneven. Now it sat straight. Too straight. My mouth went dry. Mrs. Henderson stood behind me. "Angela." I knelt slowly, ignoring the ache in my knees, and pulled the box toward me. The brass lock still hung from the latch. Locked. For one hopeful second, I breathed again. Then I saw the scratch. A fresh, thin mark across the wood near the latch, as though someone had tried to force something under it. Mrs. Henderson whispered, "Lord have mercy." I reached for the key hidden inside the dresser panel. It was still there, wrapped in the handkerchief. My fingers shook as I unlocked the box. The documents were still inside. The hospital notebook was still there. The folder of copied letters was still there, but the diary was gone. For a moment, I felt nothing. No fear, no anger, no tears. Just a wide, white emptiness, as if my body had decided the truth was too large to enter all at once. Then Mrs. Henderson said, "Angela, sit down." I did not sit. I lifted each paper carefully, as though the diary might be hiding beneath them. I checked the closet floor, the shelves, the nightstand, the dresser. I searched places I knew I had not put it because desperation makes even memory doubt itself. But the diary was gone. Not all of them. The older diaries were still in storage boxes upstairs. But the brown leather one, the one that held the hospital entry, the recent records, the careful pattern of Rebecca's lies, was missing. Rebecca had not been looking for my heart. She had been looking for paperwork. And by accident, she had taken the one thing more dangerous than any deed. That evening, I called Thomas. He did not waste time with comforting phrases. "Do not confront her yet," he said. "She took my diary. She took something from your home. We don't yet know what she thinks it is." "I know what she thinks," I said. "She thinks it might contain documents." Possibly. Or she saw the lock and assumed value. I stood by the kitchen window, looking at the dark glass reflecting my own face back at me. What if she reads it? Thomas was quiet. Then he said, "Angela, if she reads it, she will know you have been documenting her." That frightens me. It should. But it may also make her careless. I closed my eyes. I did not want strategy. I wanted my diary back. I wanted the pages no stranger had earned. I wanted the privacy of my pain restored. But that was gone now. The next morning, Daniel called. His voice sounded strained. "Mom, did you give Rebecca anything when you were here?" I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. "No. She said she may have accidentally picked up something of yours." My heart began beating hard. "What did she pick up? I don't know. Some old book?" She thought it was family records. Family records. I almost laughed at the terrible accuracy of it. "Did she read it?" Daniel hesitated. That hesitation told me more than any answer. "Daniel," she said it looked like personal notes, so she closed it. Rebecca had lied better before. I looked at the heart-shaped rock sitting on the windowsill. After the dinner, I had taken it from the blue box and placed it where I could see it while I washed dishes. "Where is it now?" I asked. "I think at the house." "Your house?" "Yes. I want it returned. I'll bring it this weekend." "No," I said. "I want it returned today." He sounded surprised. "Mom, it's just..." "Do not finish that sentence." Silence. My voice was quiet, but something in it must have reached him because when he spoke again, he sounded younger. "Okay, he'll look for it." He did not find it. At least, that was what he told me later. But someone else had. That afternoon, while Daniel was at work and Rebecca was on a video call, Emily came home early from school with a stomachache. Their housekeeper, Mrs. Alvarez, let her in and told her to rest upstairs. Emily, curious the way children are, noticed a brown leather book sticking out from beneath a stack of folders on the small desk in Rebecca's office. She recognized it, not because she had seen the diary before, but because on the first page, tucked inside the cover, was a photograph of Daniel as a little boy, sitting on my kitchen counter, with flour on his nose. Emily later told me she opened the diary only because she saw her father's picture. She read the first page, then another. Not enough to understand everything. Just enough to know the book was not Rebecca's. Just enough to see words like Daniel called today. Daniel did not call today. I pray he knows he is loved. Rebecca said, I was confused. I have not forgotten my son. Emily was 10, old enough to know when something felt wrong. Young enough to still believe truth should be handed to the person who needed it most. So she took the diary. She slipped it into her backpack beneath her school folder and waited until Daniel came home. That evening, Daniel called me again. Mom, he said, and his voice was different. Not angry, not rushed. Different in a way I could not name. Emily gave me something. My hand tightened around the phone. The diary. Yes. I closed my eyes. Did you read it? There was a long silence. No, he said. Not yet. But his voice trembled. In the background, I heard Rebecca. Daniel, that belongs to your mother. It's private. We should return it. Private. After stealing it from my house, now she cared about privacy. Daniel said away from the phone. Why was it in your office? Rebecca answered too softly for me to hear. Then Daniel came back. Mom will bring it to you tomorrow. I heard myself say, No, if you haven't read it. The words surprised me as much as they surprised him. For years, I had protected him from my pain. I had softened every truth until it no longer resembled itself. I had excused, explained, swallowed, and prayed. But something had shifted. Maybe it happened when Rebecca took the diary. Maybe when Emily found it. Maybe when Daniel's voice trembled around the edge of a truth he had not yet opened. Mom, he whispered. Are you sure? I looked around my kitchen, the yellow walls, the old table, the window where the curtains moved gently in the evening draft. The house that had remembered everything with me. Yes, I said. Start at the beginning, and don't stop when it hurts. He did not answer. Then very softly he said, What am I going to find? My eyes filled. I thought of the boy who promised never to leave me, the man who believed I was forgetting him, the husband led by someone who knew exactly which parts of love to erase. The truth, I said. That night, I did not write in the diary. For the first time in years, it was not in my hands. It was in my son's. And somewhere in Chicago, behind the walls Rebecca had built around him. Daniel Morris was about to meet his mother again. Daniel told me later that he did not open the diary right away. He sat with it on the edge of his bed for nearly an hour, staring at the worn brown leather cover, as if it might speak before he had to read it. Rebecca stood in the doorway twice, arms crossed, voice controlled. Daniel. It's private, she said. He looked up at her. Then why was it in your office? She did not answer directly. I thought it had legal papers in it. Your mother has been acting strangely. I was worried. There it was again. Worried. Rebecca's favorite disguise. Daniel placed his hand on the diary. You took it from her house. Rebecca's face tightened. I was trying to protect you. From what? from being manipulated by guilt. He almost believed her. I know that because my son is not a cruel man. He is a man who spent years being taught to doubt the woman who loved him first. That kind of teaching does not disappear in one sentence. But then, Emily appeared behind Rebecca, pale and small in her pajamas. "Daddy," she said, "Grandma wrote nice things about you." Rebecca turned sharply. "Emily, go to your room." Daniel looked at his daughter. "What did you read?" Emily's chin trembled. "Only a little. She said she remembered holding you when you were a baby. She said she missed you." That was the moment Daniel later said when something in him cracked. Not broke, cracked. Enough for light to get in. Rebecca reached for the diary. "This has gone far enough." Daniel pulled it back. "No." The word was quiet, but it stopped her. He went downstairs to the den, closed the door, and opened the first page. The photograph fell out first. It was old, faded at the edges. Daniel, at 7 years old, standing on a kitchen chair, flour on his nose, holding a wooden spoon like a trophy. I had written on the back, "Pancake Sunday." My boy made it snow again. Daniel sat frozen with that picture in his hand. Then he began to read. At first, the entries were old and gentle. September 9th. Daniel lost his first tooth today. He tried to be brave, but when he saw the blood, he climbed into my lap. Michael would have laughed and cried at the same time. October 14th. Daniel asked if heaven has telephones. I told him I did not know. He said if it does, Daddy must be calling when the wind rings the chimes. Daniel told me he read that line 3 times. He had forgotten asking that question. But when he read it, the memory returned, not clearly, not like a movie, but like warmth rising from somewhere deep. Wind chimes, my lap, the smell of my hand lotion, a grief too large for a little boy. He kept reading. Pages about school concerts, baseball games, fevers, pancake Sundays, the red scarf, the heart-shaped rock. His scholarship letter. The night before college. My son is going into the world tomorrow. I pray the world is kind to him. I pray he remembers he is loved. By then, Daniel was crying. Quietly at first. Then, not quietly at all. Because after the warm memories came the lonely ones. October 3rd. Daniel missed our Sunday call. I am sure he is busy. I must learn not to hold too tightly. December 24th. I wanted to call tonight, but stopped myself. I do not want to become a burden dressed as love. February 2nd. I sent Emily a rabbit for her birthday. I hope she receives it. I hope she knows she has a grandmother who thinks of her. Then he reached the birthday entry. Daniel must have been busy today. I hope he is eating well. I hope he knows I thought of him all evening. He stopped there because he remembered that birthday. Not as I had lived it, but as Rebecca had told it. She had said, "Your mother seemed upset about the card. I think she's becoming very sensitive. Maybe don't feed into it too much." He had called me irritated, already prepared to defend himself from an accusation I had never made. He read the next line. I miss the boy who once thought a rock shaped like a heart was enough to make me happy. Daniel left the den then. Rebecca was in the kitchen typing on her phone. Did you block my mother's birthday reminder? He asked. She looked up. What, my calendar? Years ago. Her birthday used to be in there. Rebecca blinked. Daniel, that was forever ago. That's not an answer. She set the phone down. I cleaned up your calendar because it was cluttered. You were overwhelmed. My mother's birthday was clutter. You were building a career. Daniel stared at her, and another thread snapped. He returned to the den and kept reading. The diary moved from sorrow to records. Dates, times, calls, gifts, letters, returned envelopes, exact words. Rebecca said Daniel was unavailable. Rebecca said things need to stay calm. Rebecca said I had called repeatedly. I called twice. Rebecca said I asked for no visitors. I did not. When Daniel reached the hospital entry, he stood so abruptly the chair fell backward. January 16th. Daniel believes I am forgetting him. Rebecca told him I am confused, declining emotional and possibly unable to recognize him. I heard her say I did not want visitors. That is false. I wanted my son. I still want my son. He told me later that this was the sentence that made him put his hand over his mouth like he might be sick, because he remembered that week too. He remembered standing in his office coat on keys in hand, ready to drive to Columbus. He remembered Rebecca touching his arm and saying, "Please don't make this about your guilt. The nurse said she needs rest." He remembered asking, "Will she even know I'm there?" He remembered Rebecca's sad, careful face. He had believed her. He had stayed. My son sat alone in that den and understood page by page that his absence had not been an accident. It had been arranged. Then he began checking. Not because he doubted me anymore, but because truth becomes unbearable unless the mind can touch proof. He opened his phone. My number was still there, but under blocked contacts, there was an older entry, Angela Morris home. Blocked. He had never blocked it. He checked his email filters. Messages from my old email address had been sent to archive automatically. He checked a storage drawer in Rebecca's office after she went upstairs. Behind tax folders and Emily's old school forms, he found a small stack of envelopes. My handwriting, unopened, some addressed to him, some to Emily, one marked simply "For Daniel when you have a quiet moment." He opened that one with shaking hands. Inside was a photo of him and Michael at the park, Daniel sitting on his father's shoulders, both of them laughing. My note said, "I found this today and thought you might need to remember how loved you were from the very beginning. Your father was proud of you before you could even spell your name. So am I. Always, Mom." Daniel pressed the letter to his face. That was how Rebecca found him. On the floor of her office, surrounded by letters she had hidden. For once, she had no graceful explanation ready. "Daniel," she said. He looked up at her, and the man she had shaped for years was no longer fully in her hands. "How many?" he asked. She folded her arms. "You're upset. How many letters did you keep from me?" "I didn't keep anything important." He held up the photograph. "My father is not important." Her face hardened. "Your mother uses memories to control you." "No." Daniel said, voice breaking. "You used my life to control me." Rebecca stepped back as if he had struck her. He stood still, holding the diary. She remembered everything he said. Everything. "Well, why, you told me she was forgetting me." Rebecca stepped back as if he had struck her. He stood still, holding the diary. She remembered everything he said. Everything. "While you told me she was forgetting me." Rebecca's voice dropped. "You don't understand what I was trying to prevent. I don't think you were preventing anything. I think you were removing her." Silence filled the room. Then Emily appeared at the doorway crying. "Daddy, is Grandma okay?" Daniel looked at his daughter, then down at the diary in his hand. "No," he whispered, but she told the truth. That night, close to midnight, my phone rang. I was awake. Somehow, I had known sleep would not come. Daniel's name glowed on the screen. I answered with both hands around the phone. Daniel. For several seconds, I heard only his breathing. Then my son began to cry. Not the controlled tears of a grown man trying to stay dignified. These were broken, childlike sobs, the kind I had not heard since he was small, and the world hurt him in a way he could not explain. Mom, he said, I read it. I closed my eyes. I know. You didn't forget me. My heart cracked open. No, baby, I whispered, forgetting all the years I had trained myself not to call him that. I never forgot you. He sobbed harder. I forgot you. I held the phone to my chest for a moment because the pain of those words was almost too much to bear. Then I lifted it back to my ear. No, I said softly. You were led away, but now you know the road back. He could barely speak. I'm coming tomorrow. I looked toward the dark hallway, toward the cedar box, toward the house that had carried every version of our love. All right, I said. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen until dawn. For years, my diary had held the truth alone. Now my son held it too. And nothing in our family would ever be the same again. Daniel arrived at my house the next afternoon with the diary pressed against his chest like it was something alive. I saw him through the front window before he knocked. He stood on the porch for nearly a full minute, staring at the door shoulders, bent beneath a weight I could not see but could feel. Rebecca was not with him. Emily was. That surprised me. My granddaughter stood beside her father, holding his hand tightly. Her eyes were red, as if she had cried in the car. Daniel's face looked older than it had 2 days before. Not in the way of age, but in the way of truth. Truth can put years on a person in one night. When I opened the door, Daniel did not speak. He looked at me, and his mouth trembled. Then he said one word. Mom. Not Angela, not mother. Not the careful voice of a grown man trying to manage a difficult conversation. Mom. I had not realized how long I had been waiting to hear it that way. Emily ran into my arms first. I held her close, feeling her tears soak through my sweater. I'm sorry, she whispered. Oh, sweetheart, you have nothing to be sorry for. I took the diary. I kissed her hair. You brought it where it needed to go. Daniel stepped inside slowly. He held the diary out to me with both hands. I should have brought it back sooner. I took it, but I did not open it. The leather was warm from his hands. Did you read all of it? His eyes filled again. Yes. The word came out broken. For a moment, we simply stood there, in the living room, among all the photographs of the life he had forgotten to visit. Daniel looked toward the mantel. His childhood face looked back at him from every frame. Missing teeth, baseball uniform, graduation cap, pancake mornings. The evidence of love had been in this house all along. He covered his mouth with his hand. I don't know how to stand here, he said. That sentence undid me more than any apology could have. Because he was right. How does a son stand in the house where his mother waited for him? How does a man face the rooms that held the truth when he chose the lie because it was easier, cleaner, more convenient? I touched his arm. Sit down, Daniel. He shook his head. No, not yet. I need to say it while I can. His voice trembled, but he did not look away. I believed her. I said nothing. I believed Rebecca when she said you were confused. I believed her when she said you were calling too much. I believed her when she said you didn't want visitors. I believed her when she made your love sound like pressure." He swallowed hard. "And I let that happen because it made my life easier." That was the sentence that mattered. Not because it hurt. It did hurt. But because it was true in a way excuses are not. "I let her handle you," he said. "Like you were a problem." Emily began crying again. Daniel looked at his daughter. "I'm sorry you had to see this." Emily's small voice shook. "Grandma isn't a problem." Daniel bent down in front of her. "No," he said, "she isn't." A knock sounded at the door then. Daniel turned, startled. "I was not." Thomas Walker stood on the porch with Margaret beside him, holding a leather folder. I had called him that morning, not because I wanted to ambush Daniel, but because the truth had finally reached the surface, and I knew Rebecca would not let it remain there without a fight. Thomas entered slowly, leaning on his cane. "Daniel," he said. Daniel stood straighter, almost like a boy caught misbehaving by a respected elder. "Mr. Walker, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "So do I." Thomas nodded toward the sofa. "Then let's not waste the difficult ones." We sat in the living room. Emily stayed beside me, her shoulder pressed against mine. Daniel sat across from us, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Thomas opened his folder, but before he could speak, Daniel looked at me. "Rebecca is coming." My body went still. "She called while I was driving here. She knows Emily and I came." Thomas's expression did not change. "Good." Daniel looked surprised. "Good. Lies prefer distance. They don't do as well in rooms with witnesses." 20 minutes later, Rebecca walked into my house without knocking. That told me everything. She still believed she had the right. She stepped into the living room wearing a camel coat, hair perfect, face controlled. But her eyes moved quickly to me, to Daniel, to Emily, to Thomas, to the diary on the coffee table. For half a second, fear crossed her face. Then she covered it with offense. "This is unbelievable," she said. Daniel stood. "Rebecca, you took Emily out of school early, drove to Columbus and brought her into whatever this is." Emily's hand found mine. Daniel's voice was low. "Don't use Emily to change the subject." Rebecca laughed, once sharp and cold. "The subject is that your mother's private writings are being treated like legal evidence." Thomas cleared his throat. "Some of them may be relevant considering the circumstances under which the diary was removed from this house." Rebecca looked at him. "I don't believe we've met. We have not." "I'm Thomas Walker, Mrs. Morris' attorney." Her eyes hardened at Mrs. Morris, not Angela. "Mrs. Morris, respect when enforced tastes bitter to people who are used to withholding it." "I did not steal anything," Rebecca said. Daniel stared at her. "It was in your office. I picked it up by mistake, from my mother's locked cedar box." She blinked. There it was. The mistake. Daniel had not told her how much he knew. Thomas spoke calmly. "Mrs. Morris found signs of tampering on that box." Rebecca's face flushed. "This is absurd. Angela has been confused for months." Daniel's voice cut through the room. "No, she hasn't." Rebecca turned to him. He stepped closer, holding up his phone. "I found Mom's home number blocked." Rebecca's expression barely shifted. "You must have done that accidentally years ago." "I found email filters sending her messages to archive." "You asked me to help Organto archive. You asked me to help organize your inbox. I found letters in your office." That landed. Her silence changed. Emily whispered, "Mom." Rebecca looked at her tear. "Emily, this is adult business. Eyes your inbox." "I found letters in your office." That landed. Her silence changed. Emily whispered, "Mom." Rebecca looked at her daughter. Emily, this is adult business. Daniel said, No. She found the diary because you hid it. I was protecting this family. The words burst out before she could polish them. The room went still. I looked at Rebecca, and for the first time I saw not elegance, not control, not the perfect daughter-in-law with the perfect manners. I saw fear. Daniel asked, From my mother. The room went still. I looked at Rebecca, and for the first time I saw not elegance, not control, not the perfect daughter-in-law with the perfect manners. I saw fear. Daniel asked, From my mother. Rebecca's mouth tightened. From what she does to you. The guilt, the obligation, the way she pulls you backwards every time you move forward. I stood then, slowly. Emily tried to help me, but I squeezed her hand and rose on my own. Rebecca. I said I never wanted to pull Daniel backward. She looked at me with years of resentment in her eyes. You made him feel responsible for you. No, I said. You made my love sound like a chain because you wanted to be the only voice he trusted. She laughed bitterly. You don't know anything about my marriage. I know you took letters from a boy whose father is dead. I know you told my son I did not want him at the hospital. I know you tried to have him discuss selling my house while I was recovering. I know you took my diary from a locked box. Her face twisted. You kept records like some kind of trap. No, I said. I kept records because you kept changing the truth. Daniel turned away as if the words hurt physically. Thomas placed documents on the table. For clarity, he said, Mrs. Morris has updated her trust and medical directives. Her home cannot be sold by Daniel or anyone else without the safeguards now in place. Any attempt to pressure her into signing documents will be met legally. Rebecca stared at Daniel. You let her do this? Daniel looked at the floor, then at me. No, he said. I made it necessary. I closed my eyes for a moment. That was the first time my son protected me by telling the truth about himself. Rebecca's control finally cracked. So what now? She demanded. I'm the villain, after years of keeping everything running, after managing your career, your schedule, your family obligations? Daniel looked at her. My mother is not an obligation. She made herself one. No, he said, voice breaking. You made her disappear. Silence followed. Then Emily stood beside me and said, I want Grandma at my school project. Everyone looked at her. Rebecca's face softened for the first time, but Emily did not move toward her. I want to know about Grandpa Michael, Emily said, and pancakes, and the rock K, and all the things nobody told me. Rebecca's face softened for the first time, but Emily did not move toward her. I want to know about Grandpa Michael, Emily said, and pancakes, and the rock, and all the things nobody told me. Daniel covered his eyes. Rebecca whispered, Emily. But Emily shook her head. You hid Grandma's letters. There are moments when judgment does not come from courts, lawyers, or raised voices. Sometimes it comes from a child saying the one sentence no adult can escape. Rebecca sat down, not gracefully, not in control. She sat as though something inside her had finally run out. I looked at Daniel. He looked back at me, tears on his face, shame in his eyes, but also something I had not seen in years. Choice. He was choosing to see. I picked up the diary from the coffee table and held it against my chest. I am not asking anyone to hate Rebecca, I said. That is not why the truth matters. Rebecca looked at me surprised. I continued. But I will not be handled anymore. I will not be diagnosed by gossip, protected into silence, or loved only when I am convenient. Daniel bowed his head. I know. And you? I said softly, will have to earn your way back to me. His face crumpled. I will. I wanted to forgive him right there. Every motherly instinct in me wanted to cross the room, pull him into my arms, and erase the pain from his face. But love had already taught me the cost of erasing too much. So I stayed where I was. Not cold, not cruel, steady. Rebecca left before sunset. Daniel did not follow her immediately. He stayed long enough to help Emily gather old photos for her school project. He held the picture of himself on Michael's shoulders for a long time. Before he left, he stood by the door. Mom, he said, I don't deserve another chance. I looked at him. No, I said, you don't deserve it. His eyes lowered. But I may choose to give you one anyway. He looked up, hope and pain tangled together. Not because you cried, I said, because you tell the truth now, even when it costs you. He nodded. I understand. And for the first time in years, I believed he might. Daniel came back the next morning alone. No Rebecca, no Emily, no Thomas. Just my son, standing on my porch at 9 o'clock with red eyes, unshaven cheeks, and a small cardboard box in his hands. I was in the kitchen when I heard the knock. For a moment, I thought of all the years I had waited for that sound. I had imagined Daniel showing up with flowers, with apologies, with some explanation that would make everything hurt less. But real life does not arrive like imagination. It arrives tired, ashamed, carrying a box of hidden letters. When I opened the door, Daniel looked at me as if asking permission to exist in front of me. Hi, Mom. Hi, Daniel. His eyes moved over my face, searching for anger maybe, or rejection. He found neither. That seemed to hurt him more. I brought these. He lifted the box. I stepped aside. Come in. He entered slowly, like the house itself was watching him. In a way, it was. Every creak of the floor knew him. Every doorway remembered his childhood height. Every wall had held the sound of his laughter before distance and pride, and Rebecca's careful lies turned him into a visitor. He placed the box on the kitchen table. Inside were my letters, some unopened, some opened the night before, their envelopes torn carefully along the edges. Birthday cards, photos, notes I had written to Emily. A Father's Day memory I had once sent Daniel because I thought he might want to remember Michael. A small envelope with a pressed yellow leaf inside from the maple tree in the front yard. Daniel touched the top envelope with 2 fingers. I found more after Rebecca left. I sat across from him. Where? In the storage bench, at the foot of our bed. He swallowed. And in her office filing cabinet. Some were mixed with old bills. Some were in a folder labeled Angela. My name sounded strange in his mouth. He continued. She said she kept them because she didn't want me upset. Then she said she forgot. Then she said they weren't important. He looked at the box and shook his head. I don't know which lie hurt more. I did. The last one. Things are easier to steal when you first convince yourself they have no value. Daniel sank into the chair across from me. I called a lawyer this morning. I looked up. Not Thomas, he added quickly. My own. I needed to understand what happens next. With Rebecca. With the house. With Emily. His voice broke on Emily's name. She asked me last night, if loving someone means hiding people from them. I closed my eyes briefly. Children ask questions adults spend years avoiding. What did you tell her? I told her no. His hands curled together. Then I told her I was sorry I let it happen. The kitchen fell quiet. The morning light lay across the table between us, touching the old wood where Daniel had once done homework and where I had written my diary entries late at night. Daniel looked around the room. I remembered something on the drive here. What Dad's funeral? My breath caught. He rarely spoke of Michael. I remember people bringing food. Casseroles everywhere. I remember sitting under this table because I didn't want anyone to tell me they were sorry anymore. I nodded slowly. You stayed under there almost an hour. You crawled under with me. Yes. You were wearing a black dress. Yes, you said, we don't have to be brave under tables. I smiled through the ache. That sounds like something I'd say. Daniel's eyes filled. How did I forget that you were 6? No. He shook his head. I don't mean the moment. I mean you. How did I forget who you were? There are questions a mother cannot answer without wounding her child further. So I told the gentlest truth I could. You grew a life that had less and less room for where you came from, and someone made that feel like success. He bowed his head. For a long while he said nothing. Then he stood so suddenly the chair scraped against the floor. Before I could speak, Daniel came around the table and lowered himself to his knees in front of me. My heart lurched. Daniel, get up. No. Please. No, Mom. I need to say this from here. His hands hovered near mine, afraid to touch them without permission. I am sorry. The words were simple, but this time they did not sound like a man trying to end discomfort. They sounded like a man stepping into it. I'm sorry for every call I ignored, every holiday I explained away, every time I let Rebecca answer you like you were an appointment on my calendar. I'm sorry I didn't come to the hospital. I'm sorry I believed you were forgetting me when you were the only one still remembering. My eyes burned. I'm sorry I made you prove your love. That broke something in me. A sound escaped my throat before I could stop it. I covered my mouth, but the tears came anyway. Not neat tears. Not the quiet kind I had taught myself to cry in empty rooms. These were old tears, the kind stored for years behind strength. Daniel reached for my hands then. I let him take them. His palms were warm, larger than the little hands that once held mine, crossing streets. But in that moment, he was both man and boy, both the son who hurt me and the child I had loved before he knew how to say my name. I don't know how to fix it, he said. You can't fix all of it. He nodded, crying. I know. You cannot give me back the birthdays. I know. You cannot undo the hospital. I know. You cannot make the diary unnecessary. His face crumpled. I know. I looked down at our joined hands. But you can stop making new wounds. He looked up. And you can tell the truth. Not once. Not only when it is dramatic. Every day. In small ways. Especially when it costs you comfort. I will. You can bring Emily here without making me beg for a place in her life. I will. You can stop letting anyone speak for me while I am still able to speak. His grip tightened. I will. There was one more thing. The hardest thing. I pulled one hand free and reached for the diary on the table. I had placed a ribbon near the final entry the night before, knowing this moment might come. Not because I planned it exactly, but because mothers sometimes know when a sentence has been waiting years to be read aloud. I opened the diary to the last page I had written before it was taken. "Read this," I said. Daniel wiped his face with his sleeve almost like a boy again and took the diary carefully. His voice shook as he read. March 22nd, dinner at Daniel and Rebecca's. They attempted to have me review authorization papers. I refused under attorney guidance. Rebecca lost composure when challenged. Daniel seemed surprised by the papers. Important, he remembered the rock. Not fully, perhaps, but something in him moved. He stopped breathing hard. "Keep reading," I whispered. His eyes moved to the final lines. "I never feared that I would forget my son. I feared my son would forget who he used to be. But tonight, when I mentioned the heart-shaped rock, I saw the boy I raised look back at me through the man he became. I pray he finds his way home before there is no home left to find." Daniel pressed the diary to his chest and bent forward as if those words had gone through him. "I don't deserve you," he said. I touched his hair. It had been years since I had done that. "No," I said softly. "You don't have to deserve your mother's love, but you do have to respect it." He nodded against my knee. For a while, we stayed like that. No music, no speeches, no perfect healing. Just my son kneeling in the kitchen, where he once made flowers snow, holding the diary that had carried my love when he would not. Eventually, I asked him to stand. He did unsteady. I went to the blue box upstairs and brought down the heart-shaped rock wrapped in old tissue paper. The paper had yellowed with age. The rock itself was ordinary to anyone else, gray, slightly uneven, shaped like a heart, only if you wanted badly enough to see it. Daniel held it in his palm. "I remember finding this," he whispered. "By the school fence. You said it looked like love." He laughed through tears. "That sounds like a dramatic kid." "You were a tender kid." His smile faded. "Am I still?" I looked at him for a long moment. "That depends on what you do next." He closed his fingers around the rock. When Daniel left that afternoon, he did not ask if everything was okay. He knew it was not. He did not ask if I forgave him completely. He knew forgiveness, real forgiveness, would not be a switch I flipped to make him feel better. Instead, he said, "I'll call tomorrow." I looked at him carefully. "Then call tomorrow." He nodded. "And if I can't, I'll tell you before, not after." That mattered more than flowers. At the door, he turned back. "Mom." "Yes. Can I come Sunday? Maybe we could make pancakes." The ache that moved through me was almost sweet. "Maybe," I said. Then I smiled. "But you're cleaning the flour this time." For the first time in years, my son laughed in my doorway without looking over his shoulder for anyone's approval. And when he drove away, the house did not feel empty. It felt like it was holding its breath. Not because everything was healed, because something living had begun again. Daniel did call the next day. At exactly 6 o'clock, my phone rang while I was standing at the stove warming soup. I looked at his name on the screen and waited one full ring before answering. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I wanted to remind myself that I no longer had to grab at every crumb of attention as if it were proof of love. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hi, Daniel. I said I'd call." "I know. I wanted to keep my word." That was where the healing began. Not with dramatic speeches, not with tears on the kitchen floor, not even with the diary. Healing began with a phone call made when he said he would make it. We talked for 12 minutes that first night. Not long, but honest. Daniel told me he had moved into the guest room while he and Rebecca figured out what came next. He said Emily had asked to come to Columbus on Sunday. He said Rebecca was angry, defensive, and still insisting she had only been protecting their household from emotional interference. I did not comment on that. I had learned not every ugly sentence deserved my energy. "What do you want, Daniel?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I want my daughter to know her grandmother," he said. "I want to stop being afraid of uncomfortable truths, and I want to become someone you can trust again. Trust again." Those words felt both beautiful and impossible. "Then start small," I said. So he did. That Sunday, Daniel and Emily came to my house with groceries, a toolbox, and a bag of pancake mix. "Absolutely not," I said when Daniel pulled out the box. He blinked. "What?" "No son of mine is coming into this kitchen after all these years and making boxed pancakes." For 1 second, he stared at me. Then he laughed. A real laugh. Emily giggled, and the sound filled the kitchen like sunlight. I pulled out flour, eggs, milk, baking powder, sugar, salt, and the old mixing bowl Daniel had used as a boy. Its rim was chipped, and the blue flowers painted on the side had faded, but it still held batter just fine. Emily dragged a chair to the counter. Daniel looked at me. "She's going to spill flour." "Of course she is," I said. "That's how we know it's Sunday." And she did. Not a little. A whole white cloud puffed across the counter and dusted Daniel's sleeve. Emily froze, horrified. Daniel looked down at the mess. Then he said softly, "It snowed in the kitchen." I turned away before they could see my face. Some memories return as pain. Others return as gifts. We ate pancakes at the little round table beside the window. Daniel poured syrup on Emily's plate and then on mine. He asked before refilling my coffee. He listened when I told Emily about her grandfather Michael, about how he used to dance badly in the kitchen, how he planted the maple tree out front, how he cried the day Daniel was born. Emily listened with her chin in her hands. "Why didn't I know these stories?" she asked. Daniel set down his fork. "Because I didn't ask," he said. I looked at him. He did not look away. That became our new beginning. Not perfect. Never perfect. Real beginnings rarely are. Daniel came every Sunday for a while, sometimes with Emily, sometimes alone. He fixed the porch step that had been loose for years. He replaced the kitchen window latch. He cleaned the gutters, changed smoke detector batteries, repaired the downstairs bedroom door so it latched properly, and installed a better lock. Not because I was helpless, but because he finally understood protection did not mean control. It meant respect. Rebecca did not come. For several months, I did not ask about her unless Daniel brought her up. Eventually, he told me they had separated. Not because I demanded it, not because Thomas advised it, not because Emily hated her mother. She did not. Children's hearts are more complicated than adults like to admit. Daniel separated from Rebecca because he could no longer live inside a marriage built on managed truths. "She says I chose you over her," he told me one afternoon while replacing the old porch light. I was sitting in the rocker wrapped in a cardigan watching him work. "And what did you say?" He tightened a screw before answering. "I said I chose honesty. She decided that made you her enemy." I nodded slowly. "Be careful not to teach Emily to hate her mother." Daniel looked at me surprised. "You can be angry," I said. "You can set boundaries. You can tell the truth. But don't poison a child to win a case in your own heart." He climbed down from the ladder and sat on the porch step. "How are you not bitter?" I looked out at the maple tree. Its leaves were green again, the same branches that had once tapped ice against my window during the winter. I got sick. "I was bitter some days," I said. "I wrote those days down too. But bitterness is an expensive tenant, Daniel. It takes over every room if you let it." He lowered his head. I don't want to become what hurt us. Then don't. Months passed. Slowly, carefully, Daniel earned pieces of trust back. He called when he said he would. If he could not, he texted before, not after. He asked permission before making suggestions about my house, my health, my finances. He came with me to doctor appointments only when I invited him. In front of nurses, he said, "My mother can answer for herself." The first time he said that, I nearly cried right there in the exam room. Emily's school project became a family history scrapbook. She titled it, "The House That Remembered." On the first page, she pasted a photo of my little white house. On the second, a picture of Michael in his work jacket. Then Daniel as a boy with flour on his nose. Then the heart-shaped rock. At the presentation, Emily stood in front of her class and said, "My grandma writes things down so love doesn't get lost." Daniel sat beside me in the back row and quietly took my hand. I let him. The diary stayed with me for another year. I still wrote in it, but the entries changed. June 12th. Daniel came by after work and fixed the porch light. He brought Emily. We ate sandwiches on the steps. July 3rd. Daniel called before his meeting to ask about my doctor visit. He listened. Really listened. August 19th. Emily asked if she could learn my pancake recipe. I told her the secret is not overmixing and always forgiving the first pancake for being ugly. September 5th. Daniel apologized again today, not because I asked, but because he remembered something new. I told him apologies are seeds. What matters is what grows after. Rebecca remained part of Emily's life as she should have, but her access to mine ended. I did not accept private calls from her. I did not argue. I did not explain myself again and again. Thomas once told me boundaries are not walls when they have doors with locks. The right people can still enter. The wrong people cannot walk in uninvited. I kept my door locked, and I kept my heart open carefully. On my 70th birthday, Daniel and Emily surprised me with dinner at my house. Not a polished restaurant, not a formal event, just my kitchen yellow walls, too many candles on a chocolate raspberry cake, and a handmade card from Emily. Daniel handed me a small gift box after dinner. Inside was a new leather journal. For a moment, I could not speak. "I know the old one can never be replaced," he said, "but maybe this one can hold happier years." I ran my fingers over the cover. Then I looked at my son. "Happier doesn't mean painless." "I know," he said, "but it can mean honest." He nodded. "That's what I want." Later that night, after they left, I sat alone at the kitchen table. But the loneliness was different now. It was not the old, empty kind that stared back from a second plate. It was quiet, peaceful, full of echoes, not absence. I opened the old diary one last time. On the final page beneath the entry, Daniel had read on his knees, I wrote, "My son thought I forgot him. But I remembered everything. His first cry, his little hand in mine, his promises, his mistakes, his return. I have learned that love can survive silence, but it should not be asked to live there forever. Today, Daniel is not perfect. Neither am I. But he is present. He is truthful. He is trying. Sometimes that is how a family begins again." Then I closed the diary. The next Sunday, Emily came over while Daniel worked on the garage shelves. She found me wrapping the old diary in soft cloth. "Are you putting it away?" she asked. "Yes." "Forever," I smiled. "Not forever, just safely." She touched the cloth gently. "Can I read it one day?" I looked at her young face, so open, so full of questions that deserved honest answers. "One day," I said. "When you're older, why me?" I placed the wrapped diary in her hands for just a moment. Because every family needs someone who remembers the truth with love. Emily held it like treasure. Daniel appeared in the doorway, saw the diary in his daughter's hands, and grew still. I met his eyes. There was no fear in mine anymore, only peace. The diary had once been my witness. Then it became my defense. Now it would become our legacy. And as the three of us stood in that old house, my granddaughter holding the past, my son standing humbled in the doorway, and me still here, still remembering. I understood something I wish I had known sooner. Being forgotten is painful. But being found again by someone willing to change can feel like dawn, entering a room you thought would stay dark forever.